Chapter 398. In silence, Gu Fei and his dad ended the call. Everyone has to eat. It sounded funny at first, but it was indeed a very difficult problem that martial artists had to face. Practicing martial arts was, in fact, a very luxurious activity. At the very least, it was necessary to keep up with daily nutrition. Practicing martial arts was physically demanding, and it consumed a lot of energy every day. It also required more nutrition than ordinary people. They couldn't starve and sweat every day, could they? But in today's society, any ordinary family could do it. However, the more advanced ones, such as some scientific nutritious diet methods, some scientific ways to strengthen the body, exercise equipment, and so on, were far from what an ordinary family could achieve. The country often claimed how much money was needed to train an athlete. This was not a joke. The purpose of training athletes was to achieve good results. It was not like raising pigs and dogs, and having 3 meals a day was enough. This process required a lot of specialized talents, skills, and equipment, all of which required money to maintain. It was the same for practicing martial arts. If it was just a hobby for fun, then it would be fine. But for professionals like the Gu family and the Gu family, who had made practicing martial arts their life's work and pursuit, how could they just do it for fun? Take Gu Fei as an example. Since he started practicing physical fitness when he was a child, professional technicians, such as nutritionists, physiotherapists, and so on, had been inseparable from him. How could he afford to hire such professionals if he had no money? Besides, all kinds of weird professional training equipment were custom-made. How could he afford it if he had no money? In addition, the gym and the training field needed a lot of space. How could a working-class family living in an 18-story commercial house afford it? On the surface, Gu Fei looked like a down-and-out grassroots PE teacher. However, if one really thought that Gu Fei was a PE teacher just to make a living, then they would be gravely mistaken. This was just an errand that he had inexplicably found in his search for the path of martial arts. If Gu Fei really relied on his identity as a PE teacher, who couldn't even open a cram school, he wouldn't even be able to afford the equipment to play in the parallel world. The status of the Gu family in the Kung Fu world had something to do with their business. They had already entered a virtuous cycle. They made money to support the expenses of the family, and practiced martial arts to maintain the family's reputation in the circle. But more and more children were more interested in making money than practicing martial arts. When it came to Gu Fei's generation, he was the only one left. Every family had its own problems. Most of the martial arts families were struggling to make ends meet. The Gu family was not short of money, but there was a serious talent gap. The elders in the family were discussing whether it was time to change the rule of, let them do what they like. In today's colorful world, there was too much information flow. It was already very difficult for children to focus on one thing. Hobbies also needed to be cultivated. Before Gu Fei left home, he heard that his uncle was going to raise the 2 children of his eldest cousin brother. Before Gu Fei left, he saw the room that was specially prepared for the 2 children. There was a big, Kung Fu, character on the door. When he opened the door, there were 18 soft whips. The clothes rack on the left was gone, and it was changed to a weapon rack. The antique vase on the right corner was still there, but there was a tyrant spear stuck in it, and the bright red tassel was exposed outside the vase. On the wall facing him was a picture with exquisite calligraphy. There were only 2 words, Kung Fu. On the left and right side of the Kung Fu were the 2 children's beds. They were all bunk beds, and there was nothing under them. There was no ladder, only a rope. On the left and right walls were paintings. On the left were the best moves of the 36 Gu family fist, and on the right were the best pictures of the 72 Gu family sword. There was also a big bookshelf. Gu Fei went to look through it, and it was all about Kung Fu. Of course, there were some children who didn't like to read books, but they liked cartoons and video games. His uncle had long since prepared for this. Both the cartoons and the games were all about close-range combat. I don't believe that growing up in such an environment will not develop interest. his uncle said proudly. His uncle had 2 children, but they were not interested in kung fu, which made him lose face. This time, he was prepared to use his grandson to save his face. Gu Fei remembered that when he was tormented like this, his 2 nephews were only a little more than 1 year old, not even 2 years old. This kind of training was quite effective. The 2 boys were fighting every day, and their faces, bodies, and arms were full of scratches. They had not even officially started learning kung fu. If they really started learning, Gu Fei would probably suffer internal injuries. It was said that his family had prepared for this. There were all kinds of medicine for treating bruises and injuries. Recently, he heard that they were discussing hiring a professional doctor, preferably one who knew both internal and external medicine. If that was not possible, they would hire 2. This was treatment that Gu Fei did not have in the past. Although this was funny, Gu Fei could not laugh. Even the Gu family had this indescribable awkwardness, let alone other small families that even had problems eating. With these thoughts on his mind, Gu Fei went offline early that night for his evening classes. He was also a little absent-minded. The next day, he entered the game at the same time. Thinking that he did not have to rush around today, he felt a lot more relaxed. Sunset City was also bustling with people at this time. It was the peak time of the day. As Gu Fei walked down the street, all he could hear was the discussion of yesterday's dispute. Surprisingly, there wasn't much talk about the confrontation between cloud computing and the Sunset Mercenary Alliance. Instead, there were more people talking about the battle between Gu Fei and the 100 Eras Jingles. Did you hear? Yesterday, someone from Cloud City PK with Bai Jingluan. I heard. It seems like there was no winner in the end. It seems that Bai Jingluan said he had something to do and left first. Hey, don't tell me he couldn't beat him, so he pretended to be a coward? Hey, I think so. Many players thought that Bai Jingluan couldn't beat Gu Fei, so he found an excuse to leave. Hearing this, Gu Fei could only smile bitterly. He thought to himself, why is the 100 Lives Classic so unpopular in Sunset City? How did he get along? Gu Fei didn't think about it. In Cloud City, he was also a murderous demon king, and he thought he was popular. Hey, guild leader Heartless, you guys haven't left yet. Gu Fei wandered across 2 streets, and suddenly found Sword of No Oath and his 2 brothers, Feng Xing, were strolling on the street like tourists. So, Gu Fei greeted them. The 2 turned around and saw Gu Fei. They quickly greeted him, Brother Qinli. You haven't gone back yet? It's rare to run so far, so let's take a walk. The 2 laughed. In fact, Fengxing saw that the Grandmaster of Combat in Sunset City was so outstanding and wondered if there was any rare Grandmaster of Combat equipment on the market, so he forgot to go back. Most of the players in Cloud City, after a happy gathering last night, had returned home in groups of 2s and 3s. Brother Qinli, are you ready to go back? Heartless Sword asked. Oh, a little more. Gu Fei smiled, but he was actually thinking about the unfinished fight with Bai Jingluan yesterday. Although it wasn't satisfying to fight to the fullest in the game, meeting someone who knew how to fight was better than bullying normal players. Today, he went online to look at his friend list. Bai Jingluan was not online. Gu Fei guessed that his life as a kung fu coach was not as leisurely as his PE teacher. Then Brother Qinli, you go ahead. We'll go over there and take a look. Heartless Sword and Fengxing said goodbye to Gu Fei and went elsewhere. Gu Fei felt that Unsworn Sword's mood today was obviously not as high as the day before. Logically speaking, he should still be in a state of excitement after completing the quest yesterday. However, his expression was so calm. This was not his style at all. Gu Fei wondered what had happened. Gu Fei felt strange but did not ask. Coincidentally, someone in the mercenary channel asked him about the situation. Gu Fei asked casually, and a few people laughed. It turned out that Heartless Sword was unusually excited after completing the Reigning the World mission. After drinking with everyone in the tavern for a while, he went offline before everyone else. At that time, everyone was puzzled. It was not until today that brother you brought the news. It turned out that Heartless Sword, this idiot, could not get excited even after drinking. He actually went to the game forum and announced something about the number 1 guild in the parallel world and proudly announced how they had completed the large-scale mission. As a result, this flaunt was immediately met with ridicule on the forum. Unsworn Sword was so excited that he thought this quest was exclusive to them. He had forgotten that this guild quest chain was a reward for the guild's previous competition. As long as one was the champion of the competition, they would receive this quest chain. Although the content of the mission was different, the final reward was the same. All the guild players who completed the mission would be rewarded with experience and money, and the guild level would increase by 1. As the Reigning the World mission was an expedition across main cities, it took many days. On the other hand, some main cities' guild quests could be completed in one go. Although there were failures, Unsworn Sword's claim to be the first rank 6 guild in the game was a huge joke. In the few days that he had been busy, 3 guilds had successfully completed the reward quest and reached rank 6. Among them, there were 2 guilds that had passed through the main city. One of them was Cloud Tower of Moonlit Twilight, while the other was Waterside City's Waterfront City's Sky and Water. Heartless Sword had been paying attention to his own mission and did not pay attention to the dynamics of the world. This was a huge joke. Rank 6 guilds were no longer the focus of discussion. In the past few days, the players on the forum were in full swing discussing the replacement of the 5 roaches. At the end of the competition, although many people had leveled up to the original 5 roaches of level 41, the game's ranking was based on the number of people's experience, so it was still clear who was stronger. The original 5 roaches were still the top of their respective professions, the top 5 in the game. But recently, 2 of the 5 roaches had fallen from the leaderboard due to a drop in levels. They were Deepwater and Southblade. As for the 2 new roaches, they were already the hot topic of discussion. Both of them were mages. One was called Strange Pupil, and the other was very familiar to the players of Cloud City, Against the Current. Butterfly Knot, this chapter is a transition. It will be a new chapter starting tomorrow. Everyone, give me a round of applause. Chapter 399. The mage's experience farming speed was starting to show its power at this stage of the game. There were actually 3 mages in the top 5. This meant that other than rogues and grandmasters of combat, the champions of the other classes couldn't even make it into the top 3. The top 5 was just a symbol. After expanding the list, one would realize that among the players at the top of the leaderboard, grandmasters of combat were still rare. The other classes were relatively even. The mage class was a new force to be reckoned with, making up the majority of the current high-level players. Against the Current. This was a name that Cloud City players were familiar with. It had quietly risen to the top of the game during this period of time. This was also one of the reasons why Unsworn Sword wasn't in a good mood today. His guild was indeed 1 level ahead of Singing with Wine with a player limit of 300, but he himself was a complete loser compared to Against the Current. After Azure Blade fell from the top of the warrior leaderboard, Unsworn Sword also moved up a rank. He was currently ranked 11th on the overall warrior leaderboard. This was a very awkward ranking because there was a saying in the game, top 5, top 10, top 7. The top 5 referred to the top 5 players of all classes, the legendary top 5. As for the top 10, it referred to the top 10 experts of each class. They were also very popular. Unsworn Sword, on the other hand, was ranked 11th. Perhaps the difference between him and the 10th was just a little bit of experience, but it couldn't be helped. Just this little bit put the 2 of them into 2 different worlds. Unsworn Sword was the dividing line between these 2 worlds. Those in front of him were all first-rate experts in the eyes of the players, while those behind him were all quasi-experts who were a level lower than them. As for himself, he was the representative of depression. All the players ranked 11th were the representatives of gloom. This was because there were 7 main classes in total. These were the 7 of the top 5, top 10, and top 7. These 7 leaders of gloom were often summarized by the players on the forums. However, they weren't existences that people looked up to, but existences that were ridiculed by the masses. This was especially so after Unsworn Sword made a huge joke out of being called the number 1 guild in the parallel world. In the latest update of the 7 of the 7, they were ranked first. The fact that Unsworn Sword could still laugh when he met Gu Fei showed that his mental fortitude was quite good. Naturally, the mercenary channel was filled with mockery towards Oathless Sword. Apart from Brother Yu, whose rank was relatively average, the others were all ranked in the top 10. This was especially true for Sword Demon. He had already reached the 2nd place on the Thief leaderboard. As the one in front of him was the warrior with money, Slender Waist Dance, who was clearly an aloof existence on the level leaderboard, everyone agreed that as long as Slender Waist Dance didn't die, it would be very difficult for Sword Demon to continue climbing up. Other than that, there was also Unscathed in Battle. After Jian Nan Yu's disappearance, he also squeezed into the 2nd place of the warrior ranking. Yutian Shinming and Han Family Young Master were more average. One was ranked 7th, while the other was ranked 8th. Moreover, these two players' rankings had risen due to the death of someone in front of them. It was unexpected that so many top 10 players would lose levels in one day. The forum was full of discussion. However, Brother Yu had already brought back some information. Jian Nan Yu's group of 7 was a powerful mage called Flaming Clothes. He was originally ranked 4th on the mage leaderboard and was a famous character in Waterfront City. If that's the case, then it's very likely that everyone in his group was one of the top 10 experts. It's possible that because their group was wiped, someone from the top 10 dropped. Unscathed in Battle guessed. Everyone agreed with this statement. It was a pity that the other characters didn't have any distinctive characteristics. This made it difficult for an expert like Brother Yu to ask around. Speaking of which, that guy also said that he would wait for us in Waterfront City. Yutian Shinming said. We have to be careful. If our group is wiped, the top 10 will have to be updated. We can't always cause trouble for the players on the forum. Unscathed in Battle said. It's no trouble. Brother Yu laughed. This is where our fun lies. Brother Yu obviously understood the mentality of the players on the forum who loved to summarize the top 5, top 10, and top 7. Jian Nan Yu must have heard that our mission has been completed. Maybe he's anxiously making arrangements in Waterfront City. Should we stay in Sunset City for a few more days and make him anxious? Yutian Shinming's mischievous mentality came. Everyone laughed. However, from a strategic point of view, this was a good way to strike at the enemy's spirit. Wait in Waterfront City. Then wait. In any case, everyone's days in Sunset City were just as leisurely. Let's see how long Jian Nan Yu can wait. Jian Nan Yu was indeed waiting. However, these guys from the child elite group were thinking too highly of themselves. Jian Nan Yu wasn't waiting for them at all. When Jian Nan Yu discovered that these experts were delusional enough to think that he was harboring ill intentions towards them, he did not expose them. This was because the situation was really good for him. Therefore, he even spoke according to their wishes, making them even more convinced that their guess was correct. In reality, Jian Nan Yu's target was only Gu Fei. Jian Nan Yu was already a professional player among the professional players who robbed for a living. He would no longer get involved in street and water robbery and extortion. Those players, after getting other people's equipment, still had to go out and sell it themselves. One look and you could tell that they were small craftsmen. Jian Nan Yu, after painstakingly operating for so long, already had a certain seller's market. People would often come to him because of his reputation. Of course, the things that came to him were often not ordinary. They were often things that couldn't be found on the market. For example, someone posted on the forum to show off his unique equipment, skill scroll, or something else. Such a person would often become Jian Nan Yu's target. Many customers came to him and specifically asked for this kind of equipment. As for how Jian Nan Yu got it for him, the other party didn't ask and only paid. Of course, it was a large price. Those low-end robbers earned money by selling stolen goods. As for Jian Nanyu, it could be said that he mainly sold his labor costs. This was a bit like a bounty hunter. Some people even felt that they were very cool, as if they weren't a group of people who maliciously exploded equipment. However, Jian Nanyu was very self-aware. Among the original 5 roaches, Slender Waist Dancer was the #1 money warrior in the game. His reputation belonged to the entire online gaming world. Deep Waters was the leader of a guild. His guild was the strongest in Shady Forest City. 100 years of experience led a mercenary group and was an existence that suppressed guilds. As for Drifter, as his name suggested, he wandered back and forth between the main cities. The people who had seen and recognized him were the most. As for Jian Nanyu, he was clearly the most low-key of the 5. He didn't have a guild or a mercenary group. Every day, he behaved like the most ordinary player and never caused trouble. Even in Linshui City, there weren't many people who knew him. He worked hard to rush to the position of 5 roaches to lay the foundation for his career. When everyone didn't know each other and didn't trust each other, the title of 5 roaches was naturally a symbol of strength. He relied on this to win over many customers. Now that his career had stabilized, Jian Nanyu didn't care too much about the identity of 5 roaches. It was just that his foundation was too hard in the past. After relaxing, he still hadn't been surpassed. Jian Nanyu's original goal was to rush to become the #1 player in the game. It was because the money warriors in front of him were too fierce that he didn't achieve his goal. However, it allowed his experience points to be higher than the remaining 3, and he wasn't surpassed for a while. Of course, deliberately dropping a level was a very simple and effective method, but Jian Nanyu was afraid that it would destroy the strong impression he had established in front of his customers, so he didn't use it. This time, he really lost a level, and he still felt a little regretful. After dying in Linshui City, Jian Nanyu had already begun the next step of the arrangements. The people were still the same, but this time, it was the home ground, so it was much more convenient. First of all, to come to Linshui City, one had to take a boat, and the system boat was always accurate to the second. Therefore, waiting for people to ambush in Linshui City had unique advantages. Every day, there were only a few hours from Sunset City to Linshui City. Jian Nanyu only needed to wait at the dock during this time. He definitely wouldn't miss it. The problem was that although the target was only Gu Fei, he didn't know how many companions this person would have around him. Jian Nanyu gave up on Linshui City and rushed to Sunset City for this reason. He hoped that the other party would give him some opportunities in the chaotic scene of the last stage. He didn't expect to be seen through from the beginning. As a result, he was played in circles. He went to Sunset City, but he didn't even see the face of the target. Moreover, there was news from Sunset City today that it seemed that it was that guy who had a street PK with Sunset City's 100-generation statecraft. Rumor had it that 100-generation statecraft couldn't beat the other party, so he used the excuse of going offline and left. Linshui City and Sunset City were neighbors. Some players from Sunset City would occasionally come to Linshui City to eat beach grilled fish and drink beach wine. Therefore, 100-generation statecraft, the #1 celebrity in Sunset City, had been publicized by these guys in Linshui City. In the mouth of these Sunset City players, 100-generation statecraft was a top 5 cockroach. This wasn't the most frightening thing. What was frightening was this person's PK skills. A grandmaster of combat who specialized in close combat had never been defeated in PK. This sounded a bit nonsense. If you were defeated in PK, of course, you would have died long ago and lost a level. The reason why the top 5 cockroaches were strong to this point was because they had never been defeated in PK and lost a level. However, 100-generation statecraft's experience was very different. According to the Sunset City players, since this guy's low level, it was common for him to fight 1 against 10, 1 against 20. During that time, 100-generation statecraft stood on the street with a bitter smile on his face, surrounded by players who fell to the ground and rolled. This had always been a frequent classic scene. This was how 100 Generations Statecraft's reputation was built. In the hearts of Sunset City players, whether 100 Generations Statecraft was a top 5 cockroach or not, he was equally terrifying. He was a symbol of invincibility. And such a person had lost to the video mage. It seemed that he had to reevaluate the strength of this mage. Jian Nan Yu thought seriously. Chapter 400. In Sunset City, Gu Fei wandered around for a while and cleared a few PK points. Finally, Epitaph Jinglin came online. Epitaph Jinglin's message arrived at the same time. Continue. Where? The arena, Epitaph Jinglin said. Gu Fei knew this kind of place. In Cloud City, he and Feng Xing fought there. It was usually near the combat dojo. Every main city was similar in some aspects. After asking for directions from a passing player, Gu Fei came to the arena next to the combat dojo. Epitaph Jinglin was already waiting there. One look and you could tell what a professional was. Back then, when Ji Hao fought against Feng Xing stood straight in the middle of the arena with his arms crossed. That was so cool. But in fact, nothing was more exhausting than acting cool. Although this didn't exist in the game, it was definitely a problem of awareness. Look at Epitaph Jinglin. He was walking around the arena as if he had nothing to do. From time to time, he would lift his shoulders and twist his ankles. Loosening the body in the game didn't have much use, but it would bring some relaxation to the mind, which was extremely effective. This was the difference between a professional and an amateur. Epitaph Jinglin also saw Gu Fei at this time. He twisted his neck left and right and said, "Coming." Yeah. Gu Fei nodded and raised his hand. With a whoosh, he teleported in front of Epitaph Jinglin. Hey. You can't use this when fighting. Epitaph Jinglin was dumbfounded. Of course. Gu Fei smiled. Shall we continue from yesterday? Fists and kicks are more or less the same, Epitaph Jinglin said. Let's compare weapons. Gu Fei nodded. It was hard to tell who would win if they fought with fists and kicks. Epitaph Jinglin couldn't do anything to Gu Fei, and because of Gu Fei's strength, he couldn't form an effective attack against a professional like him unless Epitaph Jinglin made a mistake, which was quite boring. But it was a different scene when it came to weapons. Weapons were equivalent to increasing the attack distance and range of both sides. This way, the more space there was, the more changes there would be. In this kind of situation, strength might not be the deciding factor, so Gu Fei felt that it would not be as awkward as punches and kicks. What do you use? Gu Fei asked. 100 Era's Grandmaster took out a long stick from his pocket. Coiling Dragon Staff? Gu Fei asked. 100 Reincarnation Jingluan nodded. Dragon Fist was the general name of their sect. Although the internal branches were still named after fists, in reality, there were some that focused on leg techniques, and some that used claws, which might not really be fist techniques. Among them, the Coiling Dragon Fist was mostly a set of weapons, such as the Coiling Dragon Staff, the Coiling Dragon Spear, the Coiling Dragon Dual Blades, and so on. What about you? Bai Jingluan asked Gu Fei. Well, what do you want to see? Gu Fei asked him. The 100 Lives Classic was depressed. However, his father had been whispering the name Gu Fei in his ears since he was young. How could he not know? This person was indeed a genius, and the variety of martial arts he was proficient in was simply beyond human imagination. As a professional, the 100 Lives Classic couldn't understand how this guy could master so many things at the age of 25. To be honest, he wasn't even 25 yet. 25 was Gu Fei's current age, and he had learned all these things even earlier than that. Now that he was being asked to choose, how stylish. From the bottom of his heart, the 100 Lives Classic was still envious of Gu Fei's talent. He also hoped that he could have the opportunity to say such a line. Unfortunately, he could only grit his teeth and say, "Use your strongest." The strongest? They're all the same. Gu Fei said. Tears streamed down 100 Lives Classic's face. In the end, he said, use your sword. I've wanted to experience the Gu family's sword techniques for a long time. Okay. Gu Fei nodded cheerfully and drew his sword. The Dark Knight Streamer Sword. The Dark Knight Streamer sword's design was exquisite, and the sword's light was obscure and low-key. However, the halo floating on its surface was unique to Supreme Weapons. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation. His image was instantly different. 100 Lives Classic didn't want to fight anymore. Make your move. Gu Fei didn't look down on 100 Lives Classic's small wooden stick just because he had a supreme weapon in his hand. He gave a sword salute and said to 100 Lives Classic. 100 Lives Classic also held his stick and bowed. Then, he suddenly swung his stick from below. Gu Fei dodged to the side. That's right. Facing 100 Lives Classic's attack, he could only choose to dodge. He couldn't use his sword to block it. His opponent was an expert. Even if his strength was far inferior to a warrior's, his technique was not on the same level. Once his strength was suppressed, 100 Lives Classic might take the initiative and gain the upper hand. After dodging the stick, Gu Fei immediately retaliated with his sword. The stick was longer than the sword. 100 Lives Classic raised his hand to block. Gu Fei wanted to stab 100 Lives Classic, but he had to move forward a little. 100 Lives Classic's wrist retracted, and the stick fell from his hand. He was originally holding the end of the stick, but now he was holding the tip of the stick. He swung his arm to the side, dodging Gu Fei's sword, and smashed the stick down on Gu Fei's head. Gu Fei also slashed to the side. He adjusted the direction of his sword and continued to stab 100 Lives Classic. However, 100 Lives Classic had already expected this change. He changed the direction of his stick midway and hit Gu Fei's sword. Naturally, Gu Fei didn't want to cross swords with his weapon, so he quickly withdrew his sword. In a short moment, both of them changed their moves. Those who knew the ropes would be amazed, but those who didn't know the ropes would not be able to imagine the difficulty. After fighting with Gu Fei yesterday, 100 Lives Classic had some understanding of his style. At this time, he said calmly, "What did you see?" Gu Fei usually didn't use his ultimate move. He seemed to be happy to see what his opponent had first. "Your stick technique is not bad," Gu Fei said honestly. Two simple moves showed that 100 Lives Classic's stick technique was quite solid. However, that was all. Gu Fei didn't find it refreshing. 100 Lives Classic obviously knew his own level. After yesterday's fight, he already knew that there was a huge gap between him and Gu Fei. His confidence in winning today's weapon duel was already very dim, and he simply wanted to experience Gu Fei's strength. "What about you?" So the encyclopedic strategist said, "Show me some of your special skills to open my eyes." "Wouldn't that be too fast?" Gu Fei said. 100 Lives Classic was hurt again. "Don't be so confident." "It's not certain yet," he said loudly. His fighting spirit, which had been dormant, was suddenly ignited. "That's good, I'm coming." Gu Fei shouted, his sword already raised. The obscure glow of the dark moonlight sword suddenly blossomed with Gu Fei's hand movements. This sword didn't take the side path and went straight for the main path, stabbing towards encyclopedic statesman. "This is an ultimate move." 100 Lives Classic curled his lips. "It's just a few more sword moves." As he thought to himself, he casually hit the sword with his stick. At this moment, Gu Fei's sword suddenly disappeared. 100 Lives Classic was shocked. How did it suddenly disappear when there was a bright light in front of him? It only disappeared for a moment, and before 100 Lives Classic could react, the sword appeared in front of him again. However, the tip of the sword was not far from him. 100 Lives Classic wanted to dodge in a hurry, but he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. Gu Fei's sword was already there. 100 Lives Classic was at a loss. There was clearly some distance just now, and he was confident that he could dodge in time. How did it suddenly reach his neck? 100 Lives Classic suspected that Gu Fei had used teleportation, however, this suspicion only lasted for a moment. Although Gu Fei frequently made him grit his teeth in anger, he believed that the guy wasn't that immoral to use a skill from the game to compete in martial arts. Gu Fei didn't hurry to retract his sword. He looked at 100 Lives Classic and smiled. Not bad, right? 100 Lives Classic clenched his teeth. He wanted to ask what was going on, but he held back and thought about the series of changes that happened just now. This wasn't a fantasy game, but a change in the sword technique that Gu Fei used. Suddenly, 100 Lives Classic's eyes lit up, and he looked back at Gu Fei. Spring is born, summer is grown, autumn is harvested, and winter is hidden. The name was very long, but it was a very famous sword technique of the Gu family. Sure enough, Gu Fei nodded. The sword flower is born in spring? 100 Lives Classic asked. Gu Fei nodded. The disappearance is, winter is hidden. According to the sequence of events, it should be summer after the birth of spring, but the disappearance seemed to be winter hidden. Sure enough, Gu Fei nodded again. And then there's Elder Xia. 100 Eras Jingluan thought of how the sword had suddenly appeared by his neck. Gu Fei nodded again. Then what about autumn? Gu Fei's attack seemed to only be 3 details, and 100 Lives Classic couldn't think of the 4th. Autumn is when you're dead. Gu Fei retracted the dark flowing light sword. 100 Lives Classic was gloomy again. I'm done. 100 Lives Classic put his poplar stick back into his pocket. It turned out that Li Du had been playing with him all along, and he couldn't even block a single ultimate move. Gu Fei didn't say anything. He wasn't modest, and he didn't comfort him. What was the point of comfort when it was the bare truth? Modesty. Why was he being modest when he was already at this level? Bolt saying, no, I'm quite slow, was no different from cursing someone. So Gu Fei put away his sword and asked 100 Lives Classic a question that he was more concerned about. I heard that you're a coach in a bodyguard school now. 100 Lives Classic looked a little unnatural. They were all in the circle, and everyone knew what it meant for him to do that. But he could only helplessly say to Gu Fei, I just want to use martial arts to support myself. Gu Fei was silent. They had all experienced the pain of learning martial arts but not having much use for it. But 100 Lives Classic's ideal was more direct. He sincerely hoped to live by martial arts. As for Gu Fei mulled over it. It sounded nice to say that he had an ideal, but in fact, he had nothing to do. There are some professional players in this game. Have you come into contact with them? Gu Fei suddenly asked. Butterfly Knot, it's a magnificent 400 chapters. How many chapters will this book have? Butterfly Knot looks longingly at the future. Chapter 401. Professional gamer. That question made encyclopedic strategists despise Gu Fei deeply. The online gaming market was so popular that there were more professional gamers than martial artists. How could he not have come into contact with them? Gu Fei's question was simply an insult to his intelligence. Therefore, he did not answer at all and looked at Gu Fei as if he was looking at an idiot. When Gu Fei saw that encyclopedic strategists despised him as if he had found a chance to take revenge, he knew that his question was stupid. However, he only smiled and said, I think you can be a professional gamer. It's quite reliable to use martial arts. What? Are you encouraging me to be a robber? There were many types of professional players. The vast majority of them were hard-working little bees. Then, there were merchants who sold equipment and items. These were all things that ordinary players could do. If you wanted to rely on martial arts, then you needed to be very strong. Currently, the only way to make a living was to rob others. There was no other choice. Encyclopedic Strategist was indeed not as good as Gu Fei in terms of martial arts, but when it came to games, he was not as naive as Gu Fei. Of course not, Gu Fei quickly said. If he did not explain, Encyclopedic Strategist would look down on his own character. Look. Gu Fei patiently explained his thoughts to him. This game market is quite big, and there are more and more professions that make money from it. Take those robbers, for example. Everyone despises them. Think about it the other way around. If you specialize in robbing these robbers, you can get rid of evil for the people, and you can also make money. Fuck. 100 Era's strategist thought that Gu Fei had a brilliant idea, so he patiently listened to him. However, he immediately despised Gu Fei after he finished speaking. Regular robbers have a wide audience. All the players in the game are their customers. Look at me now. My customers are so limited. Where can I find so many robbers? Of course it's difficult for you to do it. How can you make money if it's not difficult? Gu Fei criticized. Then why don't you do it? Encyclopedic Strategist retorted. Gu Fei thought about it again and finally heard Encyclopedic Strategist. Bro, I don't lack money, Encyclopedic Strategist burst into tears. That's right. How could the Gu family be short of money? Moreover, it was said that Gu Fei was the only one in his generation who practiced martial arts. This meant that the whole family was supporting him like a lord. You're trying to make a living, brother. It's not that easy. Gu Fei tried to enlighten him. I'll ask around and think about it, Eccentric Scholar said. Gu Fei saw that he was being perfunctory, so he threw out another idea. Also, those players who were robbed must be very sad and indignant. Who knows, they might even be willing to pay you to deal with those robbers. Hearing that it was a good idea, 100 Era's statesman's eyes lit up, but they soon dimmed. You're talking nonsense again. Who wouldn't want to take revenge? The problem is that these kinds of people usually don't show their faces in public. Don't they know that a bunch of people are gnashing their teeth at them? Look, this is the market. Most people can't find him, but you have to drag him out. You're an exclusive, brother. Gu Fei said. Eccentric Scholar was going crazy. If others can't find him, why can I? I'm just a normal person. Brother, you have to use your resources wisely, Gu Fei said. Eccentric Scholar began to think. At this point, he was officially moved by Gu Fei's words. Come, I'll introduce you to some people, Gu Fei said. Who? Fierce people. They're all fierce people in the online gaming world, equivalent to me and, your dad in the martial arts world, Gu Fei said. Eccentric Scholar's face was covered in tears again. Gu Fei actually put him and his dad together. But from Gu Fei's vague words, Eccentric Scholar understood that Gu Fei was going to say, me and you, but it didn't stand up to scrutiny. Because Eccentric Scholar was a nobody in the martial arts world, and the Gu family was still under his dad's name, Gu Fei had no choice but to change his words. Although it was impolite, there were no elders here, and everyone was young, so he didn't care so much. Eccentric Scholar felt sad for a moment, but he didn't say anything. He followed Gu Fei and asked, what fierce people? What fierce people? Fierce people were, of course, the brothers from the child elite group. Although Gu Fei was much stronger than them in PK, when it came to gaming, whether it was knowledge or connections, these people were the real experts. This was the first time Gu Fei had called everyone together. The experts all gave him face and went to the tavern they had agreed on. They came first, but Gu Fei and Eccentric Scholar were already waiting. The eyes of the people who came in one after the other were wide open. They recognized Eccentric Scholar. Weren't the two of them PK on the street yesterday? Why were they sitting together like this today? Gu Fei introduced each person to Eccentric Scholar. This was Sword Demon, that was Han Family Young Master, this was Brother Yu, and that was Unscathed in Battle. It's an honor to meet you. Eccentric Scholar couldn't help but get up to greet people. The people of Sunset City thought that eccentric scholar was an arrogant and despotic existence. In fact, martial artists like him had some traditions in their bones and paid more attention to etiquette than ordinary people. This was something that only people who had been in contact with people would know. After repeatedly saying, "It's an honor to meet you," Gu Fei finally couldn't help but ask, "You really have heard of me?" Gu Fei felt that eccentric scholar should be jackals of the same lair as him. As for these online gaming celebrities, there was no such thing as hearing of them. Eccentric scholar immediately despised him. "I've never heard of them before. Now that I've been playing for so long, how can I not know these names?" Instantly, everyone at the table felt comfortable from head to toe. They felt that they were all playing martial arts, and eccentric scholar was much more likable than Gu Fei. The atmosphere was very cordial, and Gu Fei was left alone in a desolate corner. "Where's Yutian?" Gu Fei didn't care about this. He only saw that everyone was here, but he didn't see Yutian Shinming. The four brothers looked at each other and said in unison, "No one is with him." Then the four of them were silent. Han family young master calmly raised his glass and took a sip. "Of course he's lost." Yutian Shinming was indeed lost. He wasn't originally alone, but he suddenly saw Drifting on the street, and Drifting didn't see him. This was an opportunity that Yutian Shinming was looking forward to. He immediately went alone and followed Drifting, looking for a chance to kill him. Although they had done missions together, Yutian Shinming didn't think of Drifting as a friend. He was someone he hated. If he hated someone, he would kill him. It was a game, and there weren't so many rules. Plus, Yutian Shinming was a top expert. But Drifting was clearly in the market. He weaved through the crowd and couldn't find a chance for Yutian Shinming to kill him. Thus, along the way, in the surging tide of people, he lost his target, and he himself also lost his way. Fortunately, there were many people in the city, and he could ask if he didn't know him. Coincidentally, Gu Fei sent a message, so Yutian Shinming asked for directions to the tavern. Asking for directions in a game was actually very simple. In a world with a large map like the parallel world, everyone would carefully remember the coordinates of the places they often went to. Normally, when asking for directions, everyone would just tell you the coordinates. But as a person with no sense of direction, Yutian Shinming hated this most accurate and effective method. He wanted to use the kind of, cross this street, turn left, cross 3 more streets, turn right, walk straight, turn left, method that would make most people's hair stand on end. Thinking about it, there weren't many people who could give directions like this, so Yutian Shinming had a hard time asking for directions. He stumbled along the way. Finally, after meeting the same player 3 times and asking for directions 3 times, the player was touched by the poor Yutian Shinming who held a notebook and asked for directions 3 times. He dropped what he was doing and personally brought Yutian Shinming to the tavern. Yutian Shinming was extremely moved, but he was still acting cool. "Thanks brother." Yutian Shinming said, "My name is Yutian Shinming. If there's anything in the future, just say my name." It was a pity that the other party was an uncle, and probably hadn't played the game for long, so he hadn't heard of this legendary character's name. Moreover, in his eyes, Imperial God Ming was just a little brat, so he calmly smiled and said, "All right. Don't wander around the city by yourself in the future." The uncle warned him and left. Yutian Shinming found their seats and sat down with a dignified air. It had been 40 minutes since the last unscathed in battle had sat down. The sword demon, who couldn't hold his liquor, was staring blankly. Gu Fei even skipped the step of introducing the 100 Realms strategist to Yutian Shinming. He slapped the table and said, "Everyone's here. Let's talk business. Let me catch my breath first." Yutian Shinming had been walking for a long time. His body wasn't tired, but his mind was long exhausted. Gu Fei held back his anger and waited for Yutian Shinming to gulp down 2 mouthfuls of wine before asking, "Can you say it now?" Yutian Shinming keenly noticed that Gu Fei's hand was already in his pocket, so he quickly nodded. This brother, 100 Realms strategist, is preparing to make a living as a professional player. Gu Fei said. Hey, don't make decisions for me. 100 Realms strategist hurriedly shouted. Didn't he say he was going to introduce a few powerful people? How did things progress so quickly? I haven't even thought about whether or not I want to do this business. Gu Fei glanced at him and ignored him. The remaining people had already begun to speak. Professional player, what do you do for a living? Rob people? Sure enough, everyone felt that it was a waste for someone with 100 Realms strategist skills to not be a robber. Of course not. I'm going to rob people. Gu Fei said. There's nothing to be gained from that. When the gods of the online gaming world opened their mouths to analyze, it was indeed very different. Professional robber players mostly rely on traps and ambushes. Their equipment is usually very ordinary, so there might not be any loot. But they're very hated, aren't they? Maybe someone will be willing to pay a bounty to destroy them. Gu Fei said. Brother Yu immediately smiled, a confident smile. Well, that requires a very large and accurate source of information. So Gu Fei once again introduced Brother Yu in detail to 100 Realms strategist. The king of intelligence, Brother Yu. He's very experienced in intelligence. Chapter 402. Brother Yu continued to smile, but his confident smile had turned into a burning smile. This is indeed feasible. Brother Yu began to speak with fervor and assurance. At present, in the forums of the main cities, there are already people shouting out the message of buying people to help them get revenge. It is said that some mercenary groups have begun to try to accept this kind of task. At present, the main difficulty is the intelligence. It is not easy to capture the whereabouts of such people. What, there are already people doing this business? Unparalleled Jingren thought he would be exclusive, but he did not expect that someone was already trying. For a moment, he was a little discouraged. There will be development only when there is competition. Brother Yu, go on, said Gu Fei. In fact, it is a bit too limiting to just focus on the robbers. In general, it is to PK for others, isn't it? This kind of work is actually quite common now. I dare say that if you go to the mercenary building in Sunset City now, you can get a lot of it. It is just that the target of this kind of thing is usually a master, and it is easy to leave endless conflicts, so many mercenary groups are not willing to take it. But with the strength of your 100 battles mercenary group, it is impossible that you have not come into contact with this kind of task, right? Asked Brother Yu. Unparalleled Jingren coughed and looked a little embarrassed. I have. This kind of task generally pays quite high. If you insist on doing it, I think it can already reach the income level of professional players, said Brother Yu. Unparalleled Jingren was silent for a moment, but still confessed. The problem is that it is difficult for us to do this kind of task here in Sunset City. Why? Brother Yu was puzzled. Because most of the target of the task is me. Pfft. Even a person as calm as the Han family young master couldn't help but spit, but then he naturally waved his finger to wipe his mouth. You guys go on. I see. Brother Yu also wiped his sweat. On second thought, it was not like this. Unparalleled Jingren was in the limelight in Sunset City, and even the guild could not compare to his mercenary group. Even if he had not done anything to anyone, just this jealousy alone could prompt a lot of people to want to hire people to kill. Why don't we just change to another main city? Unscathed in Battle's way of thinking was rather simple and direct. Actually, the main problem is that we don't know who's right and who's wrong in this kind of dispute between players. It's not easy to help. 100 Eras Jinglas said. That's right, so the main target is those robbers. Gu Fei said. At first, the experts were astonished by 100 Years strategist's attitude, but after Gu Fei's words, they immediately realized that the two in front of them were the same type of people. Their morals and values were basically the same. Even though they were very strong, they would never bully the weak. This was a principle that they would never violate. Up until now, Gu Fei had never taken the initiative to PK anyone. His 100 battles mercenary group rarely killed anyone in battle. In this regard, he was even kinder than Gu Fei. Gu Fei was still very much like a player at this time. He was never merciful, and he had a lot of PK points in his pocket. It made people's expressions change when they talked about it. Is that so? Brother Yu's train of thought was obviously met with a failure. Of course, he did not have the ability to distort other people's view of life, so he could only go along with the other's train of thought. If it's only against the robbers, it will be a lot of effort. I may not be very confident in intelligence regarding this group of people. Gu Fei saw that the gathering of such a group of experts did not seem to bring any positive factors. Instead, they were able to analyze the many difficulties, causing the encyclopedic statesman to shrink back. He hurriedly knocked on the table and said, "Now is not the time to make a long-term plan. I asked you guys to come because I know you have a lot of friends. See if there is any business on hand to recommend." The experts suddenly showed expressions of grief and indignation. They were all legendary figures in the game. If there was a problem that they couldn't solve themselves and needed to spend money to hire someone, wouldn't their reputation be ruined? Just as they felt that Gu Fei was being ridiculous, Han family young master suddenly said, "Yes, there is one." The others were startled, but quickly thought of something. "Hurry up and say it," Gu Fei said, then suddenly froze. "Wait a minute. You're not asking him to PK me, are you?" Gu Fei felt that with Han family young master's viciousness, the possibility of this was too high. Han family young master only looked at him with disdain, and then turned to 100 Years strategist and said, "South Harmony, this guy is a robber, and he's looking for trouble with us. Why don't you help us deal with him?" "Okay." 100 Years strategist immediately nodded. He really is a strong person. The experts all thought to themselves. Even if South Harmony dropped a level, no one dared to look down on him. What was a difference of 1 or 2 levels in the game? The parallel world made it so difficult to level up so that the difference between players would be as small as possible. South Harmony dropping a level didn't affect his status as a top-tier expert. On the other hand, the encyclopedic statesman did not hesitate at all when he heard Jian Nanyo's name. It was as if he had heard a request to kill the ant at the door. His powerful aura was indeed extraordinary. "South Harmony," Gu Fei repeated. However, he still had some impression of this shield-wielding warrior from the things that happened in the past 2 days. As for the price, "Brother 100 Years, how are you going to charge?" Han family young master asked. "This. I don't really understand. You are all experts in the game, how would it be appropriate for you to help me?" 100 Years strategist's tone was sincere, making the others feel uncomfortable. They dared to say that they were top-tier experts in front of anyone, but in front of Gu Fei's group, they didn't have the confidence to do so. No one knew better than them how terrifying people like Gu Fei could be in a PvP match. This. Han family young master looked at the others. This was everyone's problem, so he obviously didn't want to pay for it alone. "Ahem. We can deal with this ourselves," Unscathed in Battle said. Although he wasn't really prepared to deal with it himself, this was a bargaining chip that could be used to bargain. "Ah. So you don't need my help?" 100 Years strategist was honest. Unscathed in Battle didn't know how to respond. "Don't worry." Gu Fei quickly spoke. "There's someone who's just here to watch the show." "This business is definitely yours," Gu Fei said as he looked at Han family young master. Of course, he also knew that the top-tier experts in front of him would find a way to solve any trouble by themselves. Now that they were going to buy people, it might be because of him, or there were other reasons. Since it was Han family young master who said it, Gu Fei was leaning towards the latter. Considering this guy's character, Gu Fei felt that he was most likely trying to make Jian Nanyu feel uncomfortable. In any case, he was definitely trying to make Jian Nanyu's life difficult. Han family young master smiled and said, "This isn't just me. Let's split the money." Everyone burst into tears. Indeed, this was everyone's problem. However, it was definitely Han family young master's idea to buy 100 Years strategist's help. Why did he have to involve everyone? However, since the conversation had already progressed to this point, no one would be willing to say that they weren't willing to fork out the money. The few of them looked at each other and began to discuss how much money was appropriate. The price of this kind of thing is too abstract. It's really hard to determine. That's right. Besides, the market isn't standardized yet. We can't find a market price for it. Then, how much should we pay? The above discussion was carried out in the mercenary channel. Naturally, Gu Fei could see it clearly. These guys used all sorts of excuses and vague answers. In fact, they were quite resistant to paying the money. From Gu Fei's perspective, he felt that the amount of money wasn't the key. It was enough to let 100 Years strategist feel that it was a very feasible way out. Even if he took a step back and didn't just target robbers, he could just be a fighter in the game and help others PK others without asking for a reason. Gu Fei felt that it was better than going against the rules in reality and teaching martial arts to unknown people who were hard to distinguish between good and evil. Everything had to be prioritized. Sometimes, he could only avoid the important and dwell on the trivial. If he only cared about those rules and regulations, how could he live? Therefore, Gu Fei made the decision for 100 Years strategist again. Well, you guys can discuss the price again. In any case, we'll take this job first. Let's go and get rid of that Jian Nanyu first. Gu Fei said to the elite squad members, and the last sentence was directed at encyclopedic statesmen. 100 Years strategist immediately got up and nodded to them. Then I'll go. I'll go with you. Gu Fei said. I'll wait for the good news of your victory. Han family young master calmly said. What level? Gu Fei asked a more professional question. Whatever. The answer given by the Han clan's young master revealed once again that the person who hired the assassin really wanted to embarrass Jian Nanyu. Let's go. Gu Fei got up and said to 100 Years strategist. We might not make it in time today. 100 Years strategist looked at the time. The experts nodded their heads. These two were really the same. Even going offline on time was the same. We can go to Linshui City first. We'll do the details tomorrow. Gu Fei said. 100 Years strategist nodded. The two got up and said goodbye to the experts and left the tavern. Aren't your brothers coming with you? Gu Fei asked 100 Years strategist. Are they your students from the bodyguard school? 100 Years strategist nodded. More or less. I don't think there's a need to call them. There are hundreds of people. If they all come together, how can we split the money? They all have their own careers. Go and work hard as bodyguards, which has a bright future ahead of them. Speaking of which, you can also be a bodyguard. Gu Fei said. I don't even know if I'm a bodyguard or a nanny after following the boss all day. How can I not have any time for myself? 100 Years strategist was worthy of being a bodyguard coach. He already had a certain understanding of this profession. He probably had the idea of becoming a bodyguard before. It seems that your only way out is to be a professional player. Gu Fei said. Butterfly knot, cough, the mission's expedition has ended. Now we'll set off in reverse Linshui City, forward. Chapter 403. It had been a while since Gu Fei and Yisher Jingluan left the tavern. Apart from the Han family young master who was still calmly drinking, the others had sunk into a state of absent-mindedness. With this kind of person around, how are we going to survive? After a long time, Unscathed in Battle opened his mouth and sighed. Let's leave this problem for Jian Nan to worry about, said the Han family young master. Aren't we going to follow and take a look? Unscathed in Battle swept his gaze over the others. How an expert of a generation fell. This kind of story should be something that everyone was very interested in. Of course. Let's go take a look. Yu Tian Shinming jumped up. Don't be anxious, said the Han family young master. The four looked at him, wondering if this guy was up to something again. Is Linshui City a place where we can go whenever we want, said the Han family young master. What? The four were startled. We need a ship, expert. The Han family young master looked at the four's grave expression in disdain. It was obvious that they thought there was a huge problem. Oh. The four came to a realization. It was easy for the people of Linshui City to ignore this problem. Then they, unscathed in battle, was speechless. The Han family young master had already remembered this matter, but he unexpectedly didn't remind the two. It was really too vile. There are no ships at this time. Brother Yu took a look at his intelligence notebook and announced. TSK 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 TSK. Yu Tianxinming's face was full of schadenfreude. Sword Demon was a bit kinder and sent a message to Gu Fei. At this time, the two had already left the city gate. After receiving the message from Sword Demon, Gu Fei immediately reacted and slapped his forehead. When will there be a ship? He asked the 100 Reincarnations Jingluan. That's right, we need to take a ship to get there. The 100 Reincarnations Jingluan also came to a sudden realization. He hurriedly asked for the time, but after asking, he repeatedly shook his head. Not today, it's too late. Let's talk about it earlier tomorrow. Can we catch the earlier boat if we hurry? Gu Fei asked. It's a little difficult, unless you go to the docks and log off now, said 100 Generations Jingluan. The dock of Sunset City was not a safe area for going offline. There was no need to take such a big risk for such a small matter. Let's just do it on the weekends. Do you have time off? Gu Fei said. Yes. Saturday it is then. 100 Generations Jingluan said. After confirming it, the two returned to Sunset City. After the elites learned of this decision, they all rejoiced for Jian Nanyu. His nightmare could finally come 2 days later. It was Thursday now, and there were still 2 days before Saturday. On Saturday, Gu Fei entered the game before noon. The Book of Wisdom was also online as promised. The two of them had already made an appointment 2 days ago. They were going to board the ship that would depart at noon and head to Linshui City. During this gorgeous period of time, the experts of the elite squad were offline. Gu Fei met up with the 100 Eras Jingluan and rushed to the pier. After boarding a boat, they staggered towards Waterside City. This was already the third day after the guild quest, Reigning the Four Seas, was completed. Jian Nanyu foolishly waited in Waterside City for 3 days. Because the Waterside Pier was the most popular place in Waterside City, it was a convenient place to monitor. Every day, Jian Nanyu and a few of his brothers would rush over when a boat came to Sunset City. They would mix in with the customers and stare unblinkingly at the players who disembarked from the boat. The first day had the most people. Although the players of Cloud City didn't have to move together after the quest, because they had to board the boat, everyone still squeezed together. As soon as the boat docked, a dense mass of people rushed out. Jian Nanyu and his group were already mentally prepared. At this moment, they didn't even dare to blink and stared with all their might. However, in this group of people, apart from Jian Nanyu himself, no one else knew who Gu Fei was. They could only first find a mage wearing a black robe and then let Jian Nanyu identify him. Moreover, they couldn't directly rush over to identify him. They had to pretend to sit at the table and calmly drink. It was very tiring. In the end, the people who disembarked from the boat dispersed. They didn't find Gu Fei, nor did they see the experts of the child elite group. It was the same on the first day. The second day, they didn't see any of the people in this group. On the third day, everyone waited on time for 3 more boats. The number of players coming from Sunset City had clearly decreased, but the person they wanted to see still hadn't arrived. At this time, it was just past noon. The 7 people gathered at the pier again. You're here. The player in charge of the open-air wine stall skillfully greeted the 7 people. Jian Nanyu was quite depressed. Of course, he didn't want to attract attention, but in order to see clearly, he had to sit in the most advantageous position. In the end, he waited for 3 days and became a regular customer of the wine stall. The person you're waiting for hasn't arrived yet? The wine stall player didn't even ask what the 7 people wanted. He directly brought over the drinks they had ordered for the past 3 days and asked a lot of questions. Hee, that's right. Jian Nanyu's smile was a bit awkward. Even their intentions were exposed. Fortunately, it was impossible for those guys to have any dealings with Waterside City, so the news wouldn't leak out. After all, the wine stall player was someone who worked in the service industry for a long time. He was good at reading people's expressions. With one look at the atmosphere, he knew that he wasn't welcome, so he silently left after receiving the money. Looking at the situation, it's very likely that those guys are together, Flaming Jacket said after the player left. Jian Nanyu nodded his head. It had been 3 days, and whether it was Gu Fei or those experts, not a single one had appeared. They were all friends, so it was very likely that they were acting together. If that's the case, then we can only use Plan B, Jian Nanyu said. Everyone nodded their heads. Of course, they had expected Gu Fei and his expert friends to be together, so they had already designed a plan. How troublesome. Archer Glue complained as he yawned. For the past 3 days, none of them had a good night's sleep. The ferry made 6 trips a day, and each trip was 4 hours apart. They didn't want to miss a single trip, so they basically slept for 3 hours at a time. It was very painful. It's about time, Jian Nanyu looked at the time. The other 6 nodded their heads. They put down their glasses and focused their attention on the water. The ferry was already faintly visible. As the ferry got closer, the 7 of them began to look forward to it. Bang! The ferry touched the shore. They weren't afraid of it breaking. The system's ferry was just that bold. The wooden planks fell from the boat, and the 7 of them felt their hearts skip a beat. Then, groups of people began to walk out of the ferry. Finally, a black robe entered the eyes of the 7 of them. The 6 of them tried their best to confirm that it was a black-robed magician, and not an illusion, before looking at Jian Nanyu. That's right. It's him. Jian Nanyu let out a long sigh. He felt like he was finally released. Putting aside the matter of whether they could settle it, at least they wouldn't have to wait here anymore. It was too torturous. I don't see his companions. Fiery Coat was quite excited. People like the Sword Ghost and the Han family's young master were very distinctive. Anyone would be able to recognize them in a crowd. At this time, the people on the ship had all left, but there was no sign of these people. Glue, who could see more clearly than them, concluded, but he's not alone. He has a companion with him. The others don't seem to know each other. Plan A or Plan C? The priest among the 7 asked Jian Nanyu. They came up with a total of 3 plans, A, B and C. Plan A was for Gu Fei to travel alone, Plan B was for Gu Fei to travel with an expert companion, and Plan C was for Gu Fei not to travel with an expert companion, but to travel with someone else. Even though they had a companion, it didn't seem necessary to use Plan C if they only had one companion. They could still use Plan A. Jian Nanyu was about to come to a conclusion when his eyes suddenly widened. Fiery Coat, Black Water, and the other priest had the same look on their faces. What's wrong? Glue was curious. Why are they together? Jian Nanyu was still surprised. What's wrong? Glue was still confused. The guy with the video mage is 100 Lives Statesman, Fiery Coat said. During the trip to Sunset City, Jian Nanyu, Flaming Jacket, Black Water, and the priest had met 100 Reincarnation Jinglin before. However, Glue and the other 2 had died and returned to the city, so they did not know who 100 Reincarnation Jinglin was. Why is the encyclopedic statesman with him? Glue was also shocked. 100 Lives Statesman was a symbol of invincibility in Sunset City, and some players in Sunset City had also brought him to Waterside City. 1 against 20. What a terrifying existence this was. Now that Gu Fei had such a person by his side, it was obvious that he wasn't an A, B, or C. The 3 plans that they had painstakingly formulated didn't work in the end. Gu Fei had an unexpected companion by his side. How did they get together? Didn't they fight at Duel Street a few days ago? Fiery Coat was still confused. No discord, no concord, someone deduced. Why are you still talking about this? How are we going to deal with him? Blackwater looked at Jian Nanyu. When Jian Nanyu recognized that the person was the 100 Era's statesman, he had already been thinking of countermeasures. At that moment, his brain was operating at high speed like a CPU. On the other hand, 100 Lives statesman was amazed by the beach of Waterside City after he got off the boat. Seeing is believing. Seeing is indeed better than hearing 100 times. There's grilled fish over there. It tastes pretty good, Gu Fei introduced to 100 Lives statesman. As the 2 of them talked and walked, they suddenly stopped and looked at each other. Did you feel it? Gu Fei understood what 100 Lives statesman meant. Yes, I did. 100 Lives statesman nodded. Someone is paying attention to us. Gu Fei said. The 2 turned their heads and looked in the same direction. They found us. Glue exclaimed. What? Jian Nanyu, who was still cosplaying as a CPU, suddenly came back to his senses. He looked up and saw Gu Fei and 100 Lives statesmen looking in their direction. They immediately stared at each other. How can it be? The spot that they chose was inconspicuous. It shouldn't have caught anyone's attention. How did they discover us as soon as they got off the boat? They couldn't figure it out. They're coming. Blackwater shouted. Gu Fei and 100 Lives statesmen were already walking toward their table. Chapter 404. Kenan Yu was a little surprised. This was because Gu Fei and his companion were actually walking straight towards them. This was actually quite abnormal behavior. Although Kenan Yu and the others had been planning to kill Gu Fei for a long time, their intentions hadn't been exposed so far. Gu Fei shouldn't have known that they were up to no good. Then why did he walk over here with such a clear purpose? Why was that? If it was to take revenge for his friends, then why didn't his friends appear? Could it be that he was just passing by, and when he saw us, he suddenly wanted to take revenge, so he came over? Kenan Yu thought that this was the only possibility. Of course, he didn't think that Gu Fei was actually looking for him for business. You said it wasn't easy, but it's so easy. 100 Generations Jinglin praised as he walked. That's why I said that this class has a bright future. Gu Fei said. Brother Yu and the others guessed correctly. Kenan Yu and the others were originally in the top 10 of the class leaderboards, but because they were completely annihilated in the battle against Sunset City, they fell off the leaderboards. The 7 of them were in the same situation. Even though they had dropped a level, they still had their heroism. Otherwise, they wouldn't have continued to calmly plan on how to fight against the experts of the child elite group. However, the appearance of 100 Generations Jinglin at this time had somewhat disrupted their plans. At this time, there was no time for any meticulous planning. Kenan Yu gave the other 6 a look. Don't worry about 100 Generations Jinglin. Do your best to kill the video mage. The 6 nodded. Gu Fei and 100 Generations Jinglin walked step by step. Although the 7 of them didn't move, the bowstring of glue had already been drawn. The flaming cloak had already started to review the chant of the first spell they were going to use. Don't move. Kenan Yu saw that the 2 ranged classes wanted to make the first move, so he hurriedly reached out to stop them and gave them a look. Everyone looked over and saw that the player in charge of the wine stall had already walked over to greet the 2. What do you 2 need? Oh yeah. Gu Fei suddenly thought of something. It's not convenient to PK on this beach, right? The wine stall player's expression immediately changed. 2 other people heard the commotion and rushed over. What's the matter, you 2? Why can't we PK here? Master of the 100 Lives asked. Because it will affect their business. Gu Fei said. That's right. Hearing Gu Fei's words, the other party felt that he was quite sensible, and his expression immediately eased a lot. So if you want to PK, I'll have to trouble the two of you to change places. At this moment, Jian Nanyu had no intention of evading. He smiled and looked at Gu Fei provocatively. Of course, his action was not meaningless. He suddenly realized that although it was hasty to make a move here, it was actually beneficial. At the very least, the 7 of them did not look like they were here to cause trouble. The 2 troublemakers, Gu Fei and Master of the 100 Lives, would be collectively hunted down by all the major guilds in Linshui City. Jian Nanyu naturally welcomed this kind of chaotic scene. He liked to fish in troubled waters in such a situation. Previously, he followed them to Sunset City with this kind of tactical intention. He did not expect that after the previous failure, he would go around in circles and now he would have such an opportunity in Linshui City. Jian Nanyu really did not want to miss this opportunity, so he looked down on Gu Fei, provoked Gu Fei, and used a smile to provoke Gu Fei. A guy like him, who could easily get dozens of PK points, was definitely a hot-blooded and impulsive person, so he would definitely make a move regardless of everything. Jian Nanyu thought so. In this case, the 7 of them did not even need to make a move. The people from the various guilds on the beach would first stand up. Although they might not be a match for these 2 experts, a chaotic situation had already occurred. What was even more wonderful was that Gu Fei would definitely get PK points again in this chaotic battle. PK points were what professional robbers loved the most. It was the most powerful equipment to improve their work efficiency. Jian Nanyu felt that it was very beautiful when he thought about it, so he continued to increase the intensity of his provocation. Then, he saw Master of the 100 Lives point at him and say, "That person is Jian Nanyu. I know him." Gu Fei nodded. "He seems to be looking down on you," Master of the 100 Lives said. Gu Fei smiled. "He's about to die. I don't care if he's arrogant for a little longer." Jian Nanyu was depressed when he heard this. It was not because of Gu Fei's contempt, but because he already understood that tricks like provocation were obviously useless against Gu Fei. This person would not disregard everything for such a small matter. In this case, the chaotic scene that he was looking forward to would probably not appear. But then, he heard Gu Fei say to the 3 people, "The 3 of you, I promise that our attacks will be clean and neat. We won't bring any trouble to you." The 3 people were not so easily convinced. They shook their heads like a rattle drum. Moreover, they heard that the person sitting at the table was Jian Nanyu, and there were a total of 7 people at the table. How could this fight be clean and neat as he said? "The 2 of you, we won't ask about your conflicts. However, this is where we do business, so please settle your matters elsewhere." The other party's tone was still polite. People were indeed different. If this was a guild from Moonlit Night City, who would talk so much nonsense with you? They would just kill you. Gu Fei really hoped that the other party would be more violent like the players from Moonlit Night City. Now that they were polite, he was really embarrassed to make a move. "Really?" Gu Fei asked. The other party shook his head. "All right then." Gu Fei looked helpless. He turned around and was about to leave with Bai Jingluan. The 3 people thought that the 2 people would leave and let their guard down. However, Gu Fei suddenly turned around and raised his long sword, pointing it at the sky. "Fire will from the sky. Run!" Huo Rini shouted. The table that was full of 7 people a moment ago was instantly empty. Jian Nanyu's group was quick to react. As soon as they heard Fire Lini's shout, they immediately retreated with their chairs. "You!" The 3 players did not expect Gu Fei to do that. They were naturally furious. However, Gu Fei casually put his sword back into his pocket and said calmly, "What's wrong? Can't I just strike a pose?" The 3 of them were startled by Gu Fei's words. When they turned around, they saw that the 7 of them had run in 7 different directions. They were obviously in a sorry state, but there wasn't even a trace of fire in the sky. It was obvious that Gu Fei had simply waved his sword. The 7 of them were too nervous. Indeed, it was just a simple pose. There was no PK, however, the rules of the beach were set by the players, not the system. Naturally, it was very flexible. Although there was no PK, Gu Fei was also causing trouble, so he naturally had to be punished. The 3 players' faces were completely dark. "Brother, it seems that you're here to cause trouble on purpose." As they spoke, people from other wine stalls also rushed over. They were all players from various guilds. However, Gu Fei shook his head. "No, I'm here to kill people." After saying that, he waved his hand and suddenly disappeared. This was the first time the 3 of them had seen such a strange disappearance. While they were at a loss, they suddenly heard a cry of surprise from behind them. The 3 of them quickly turned around, only to discover that the person who was originally with Gu Fei had taken advantage of everyone's attention being diverted by Gu Fei to approach the table. After dodging in panic, he realized that it was just a trick. Before he could adjust his emotions, he discovered that Bai Jingluan had already rushed in front of him and was about to punch him. Having no time to think, Kenan Yu naturally raised his shield to block it. Unfortunately, the person he encountered today was not an ordinary person. When Bai Jingluan's punch came at him, Kenan Yu raised his shield to block it. He blocked Bai Jingluan's punch, but he also blocked his vision. He did not know that Bai Jingluan's punch could change midway. It suddenly turned into a claw and grabbed the edge of his shield. Jian Nanyu followed up with a charge. He used charge with a shield. Although it shortened the attack distance and attack power, it increased the area of attack. When a warrior used charge, it was never for the damage it dealt. The most important thing about charge was its high chance of stunning, as well as allowing the slow-moving warrior to burst forth with extreme movement speed. Almost no one could dodge such a close-range charge with a shield. Unfortunately, Jian Nanyu was up against 100 Reincarnation Jingluan today. He had already expected Jian Nanyu's attack. While grabbing his shield, he immediately used the force to pull back. As Jian Nanyu charged forward, 100 Reincarnation Jingluan threw himself behind him. Kenan Yu's charge missed. When he saw a figure flashing past him, he naturally knew that something was wrong. Sure enough, just as the skill ended, before he could turn around, Bai Jingluan had already grabbed his waist. Kenan Yu only had time to shout, "Oh no," before he was already in the air. Just like how a warrior would gain speed when using charge, when a grandmaster of combat used hug throw, players who were carrying heavy loads would be as light as a feather in their hands. When the 3 people at the wine stall turned around, they saw Jian Nanyu being thrown out. Even Jian Nanyu's other 6 companions did not have time to react. Everything happened too quickly. When they looked up and noticed the abnormality, they saw the 100 Eras Jingluan swinging his body behind Jian Nanyu and rushing forward to carry him away. But it was not over yet. The place where Kenan Yu was about to land was also specially chosen by Bai Jingluan. It was spacious and would not disturb anyone. At this moment, Gu Fei used teleportation and flew over. The Dark Night streamer was already raised, and the flames were already faintly flowing on the blade. Kenan Yu wanted to extend his shield to block, but unfortunately, he was hit by the Grandmaster of Combat's hug throw. Before he landed, his body was in a forceful state and could not make any movements. Kenan Yu landed, and dust flew everywhere. As one of the 5 strongmen, although Bai Jingluan did not care as much about game equipment like Gu Fei, it was not to the extent that it was unsightly. Just the many system missions that he had obtained in Sunset City were enough for him to be fully equipped. This was not a martial arts competition, so he was naturally fully equipped. The moment he landed, Kenan Yu felt his life slipping away uncontrollably. At the same time, a bright red flame had arrived with the wind. White light. Chapter 405. If this was in the real world, Jian Nanyu's unwilling corpse and bloodstains would be left on the ground. Luckily, this was just a game. After the white light showed off, there was nothing left on the ground. Gu Fei calmly put away his sword and turned around to smile at the three people in the wine stall. Look, I said I would act quickly. I won't cause you any trouble, right? The three of them were speechless. Everything happened too quickly. From Gu Fei raising his sword, the three of them getting angry, to Gu Fei disappearing, the three of them turning around, Jian Nanyu being sent flying, and Gu Fei slashing down, all of this happened in a few short seconds. The players who stared at this scene collectively forgot to breathe. They were all trying their best to recall what had just happened. The remaining 6 of Jian Nanyu's group of 7 were at a loss. From the moment they figured out what had happened to the moment they had the thought of helping, Jian Nanyu had already died under Gu Fei's sword. That 100 lives Jingluan didn't give them a chance to take revenge. After using the body hug technique, he had already flashed back to Gu Fei's side. We'll meet again if there's a chance. Gu Fei actually said goodbye to the 6 people and then swaggered away with 100 lives Jingluan. He opened the mercenary channel and sent a message. This is the first time. So fast. Brother Yu was extremely shocked. Looking at the time, the 2 of them should have just gotten off the boat. Could it be that Jian Nanyu was standing at the pier waiting for them to kill him? Ha, our luck isn't bad. We met him as soon as we got off the boat. Gu Fei said. He was waiting for us. Han family young master said. Everyone immediately reacted. They also thought that Jian Nanyu was secretly waiting for them at the pier and was unfortunately exposed by Gu Fei. Of course, in reality, Jian Nanyu was waiting for Gu Fei. This was something the experts didn't know. How many times do I have to kill him? Gu Fei asked. The work had already begun, so he couldn't be careless anymore. Of course, he had to understand the work first. Kill as many as you can. Anyway, isn't it a piece of cake for you? The Han family young master casually threw Jian Nanyu into the bottomless abyss. It was obvious that he did not have any sympathy. That's true, Gu Fei admitted. If he was alone, he wouldn't care about Jian Nanyu and the others. Moreover, he had a powerful assistant like the 100 reincarnations Jingluan. Gu Fei was excited when there was a fight. He had forgotten that the Encyclopedia of Classics was the main character. He should be here to help. Should we continue? 100 eras Jingluan asked Gu Fei. Naturally, he could not see the conversation in the elite group channel. Kill. Gu Fei nodded. Since someone is paying, just kill. This money is too easy to earn. 100 eras Jingluan was excited. Warrior camp, I wonder if we can stop this guy. Let's take a look first. Gu Fei was already very experienced in this kind of thing. At a time like this, a scheming person would most likely set up a trap in the camp and wait for you to walk right into it. However, he was skilled and daring. At this time, killing the target and the trap at the same time would naturally be the most satisfying thing to do. Therefore, he was too lazy to care so much about it. After the 2 left the beach tavern, their figures gradually disappeared. However, the shock they left behind did not fade away. Especially the 3 people in the wine stall. After looking at each other, one of them said, "Let's inform the guild leader." Indeed, Gu Fei's actions were clean and neat. It was so fast that it did not even cause chaos. It did not affect their tavern's business at all. However, the problem was that Gu Fei's actions had broken their rules. This was something that would damage their reputation. Regardless of whether it was an expert or a guild, the more powerful they were, the more they would value their reputation. Gu Fei had killed a person in their wine stall in front of everyone. If they did not take any action and let the matter rest, there would definitely be people who would use this topic to cause trouble in the future. Even if they did not cause any trouble, they would sometimes make a few sarcastic remarks and mock their guild for bullying the weak and fearing the strong. It was also very unbearable for them to have double standards when they saw an expert. So, even though Gu Fei's actions didn't cause any material harm to them, it was a mental blow. The 3 of them also realized that they couldn't just let this matter slide. So, they hurriedly notified their guild leader and let him make a decision. While the guild was focused on this matter, Huarini immediately turned to a cleric beside him and said, "Dao Xiang, quick." After Gu Fei and encyclopedic strategist left, Huarini's group of 7 turned to a cleric beside him. The cleric's full name was Dao Xiangmu. He had been staring at the spot where Jian Nan had disappeared. At this moment, he nodded slightly and quickly walked forward. He took out his magic staff and carefully drew it on the ground. Then, he pointed the magic staff at the ground and took out a small book with his left hand. After flipping to a page, he held it in front of him and started chanting. This strange scene immediately attracted the attention of many players. The other 5 members of the group of 7 also stood by the side, protecting Dao Xiangmu in the middle. What are they doing? What is that guy in the middle chanting? He's not chanting, is he? Dao Xiangmu's posture was very difficult to understand. He was chanting while casting a spell, but he was holding a small book in front of him. This was really out of place. Could it be a very long chanting? The people's wisdom was endless, and they were getting closer to the truth with their guesses. What kind of spell is that? The chanting was so long that they couldn't remember it. It was obviously a very powerful spell. At this moment, everyone looked at the spot where Jian Nan had cast the spell. Someone finally guessed the truth. Could it be, white light shone again? At the empty space where Dao Xiangmu's spell was pointing, a layer of white light that looked like a half-dead cloud appeared. But soon, the layer of white light emitted an extremely dazzling light that was so bright that people couldn't open their eyes. Fortunately, the light disappeared in a flash, and Jian Nan reappeared on the empty space in the position where he had died. Blackwater bent down and helped him up. Fire Lini had already passed him some bread and fruits. Jian Nan took it and let out a long sigh. He looked around and asked, "Gone?" The 6 people nodded. Inakagami kept his notebook and also took out some fruits to eat. Jian Nan looked at the countless surprised gazes around him and sighed. "They saw us." The 6 people nodded helplessly. Resurrection. Dao Xiangmu's incantation was so long that he couldn't remember it. The effect was actually resurrection. This was a skill that wasn't even mentioned in the official announcement. The players had thought that resurrection didn't exist in this game. At this moment, the Linshui city players witnessed the entire process of resurrection and were shocked speechless. They were shocked twice in a row and didn't know what to say. "Let's leave this place first." Jian Nan, you didn't even care about eating and called for the others to leave. A man's wealth was his own ruin. As a robber, Jian Nan Yu and his group understood this better than anyone else. This resurrection skill was called Resurrection of the Dead in the parallel world. It was a skill that only priests had. Priests were supposed to be healers, but when they had resurrection skills, they would become gods. Although Resurrection of the Dead was troublesome to cast and the chanting was extremely long, the value of this skill was indescribable given that the players would lose a lot of EXP after dying in the parallel world. Players who were resurrected by Resurrection of the Dead would be exempted from death. Of course, this did not include the equipment, money, or other items that were dropped upon death. If these items were picked up by others, they couldn't be resurrected. The cooldown time of this insane skill was even more insane. It was as long as 12 hours. Furthermore, the cooldown time was cumulative, so there was no need to go offline. The skill would be restored to its usable state after coming back online. The players who accepted Resurrection of the Dead also had 3 requirements. Firstly, they had to do it within 5 minutes of death. Secondly, they had to not leave the resurrection area after death. Thirdly, they had to accept the system notification of the resurrection ritual. Therefore, when they saw Gu Fei and encyclopedic strategist leaving in a hurry after killing Dao Xiangmu, they decided to use this skill. After all, dropping from level 40 to level 39 was a completely different concept from dropping from level 41 to level 40, even though the EXP loss from level 41 was higher. The 7 of them left the beach in a hurry under the burning gazes of the players. They had no doubt that in a few days, all the players in the parallel world would know that resurrection skills existed in the game. This insane skill wasn't something that only clerics would want to possess. Teams with fixed clerics would also want their clerics to master resurrection skills. In theory, it was impossible to rob skills. However, the problem was that experienced players knew that skills that didn't exist in the official skill tree were usually skills that came with equipment. Dao Xiang Mu's Resurrection of the Dead was a skill that came with his Staff of Resurrection. With the current status of Dao Xiang Mu's group of 7 in the field of robbing, he was sure that within 5 days, there would definitely be people looking for them for the resurrection skill. Thinking of this, Dao Xiang Mu could only smile bitterly. Of course, he had many excuses to reject this mission. However, the problem was that he didn't know if there would be people like him looking for him. Although Dao Xiangmu had never heard of a high-end robbing group like the 7 of them, he was sure that such a group definitely existed. It seemed like both parties would meet in such a manner. This matter could only be discussed in the future. Right now, he had to continue with this business. At this time, the 7 of them had arrived at the city gate near the beach. "These 2 guys seem to be coming for me," Dao Xiangmu said. The 6 of them nodded. They targeted Dao Xiangmu the moment they arrived. With such a targeted target, the conclusion was self-evident. "Then, they might go to the warrior camp to stop me now," Dao Xiangmu said. "Jiannanyu said, he has some PK points right now. We should think of a way to increase his PK points. That way, it will be easier for us." Butterfly Knot, good morning everyone, a new month has arrived, and a new chaotic battle is about to begin. Chapter 406. Sunset City. The remaining 6 masters of the child elite group had already gathered together. Many of them had ugly expressions on their faces. "Why did you ask Qianli to kill as many as possible?" Yutian Shinming's face was filled with grief and indignation as he questioned the Han family young master. Everyone's memories couldn't help but return to the very early days of the game. Non-Smiler, a fellow who could be considered a character, had been cut down 8 levels by Gu Fei before anyone had made a clear request. Now that the Han family young master had actually said, "Kill as many as possible," everyone's mind had already conjured the scene of Jian Nanyu standing naked in the resurrection area, his figure hanging, 2 lines of tears of regret flowing down his cheeks. Everyone was actually quite willing to watch this scene, but the problem was that the price of the tickets was not low. Under the heroic encouragement of the Han family young master, Jian Nanyu would have been cut down 20 or 30 levels by Gu Fei no matter what. They would have to pay for this labor. Thinking of this, the few of them fiercely clutched their money bags, and their resentment towards the Han family young master deepened. How could Jian Nanyu be as stupid as Non-Smiler? The Han family young master's words were filled with ridicule. In fact, Non-Smiler was not stupid. It was just that in the early days, he had seriously underestimated Gu Fei's abnormal skills that could destroy the game's balance. That was why he had fallen for it. Jian Nanyu should not have been so careless, especially after he had just been killed once. It was impossible for him to be like Non-Smiler that day, rashly thinking of ways to take revenge. Yes, Jian Nanyu is a cautious person. Just now, Qianli might have attacked too quickly and caught him off guard. He would give such an opportunity to others once, and there would never be a second time. Brother Yu was friends with Jian Nanyu, so he more or less had some understanding of him. However, in the current situation, this friend only existed in name. So let's hurry up. Jian Nanyu must have set up some trap to deal with us, but now he must have been disrupted by Qianli. If we don't take this opportunity to shine, what are we waiting for? The Han family young master flung his priest robe and stepped out of Sunset City. Ah! The other 4 finally reacted. It turned out that the Han family young master did not buy the Encyclopedia of Wisdom just to watch the show. It was mainly to distract Jian Nanyu's attention and cover their perfect landing. He was prepared to settle his grudge with Jian Nanyu himself. Thinking of this, the few of them perked up. Yutian Shenming slung the 3 bows over his shoulder and went straight out of Sunset City. His current attire was completely for the sake of appearance. In actual combat, he would definitely carry the 3 bows in his pocket, which was much more convenient than taking them off his shoulder. Let's go. Sword Demon and Unscathed in Battle looked at each other, nodded, and walked out side by side. Brother Yu was stunned for a moment, then quickly chased after them, shouting, "Now? Where's the boat? I've already contacted it." The Han family young master, who was walking at the front, waved his hand. Contacted what? Brother Yu was puzzled. The other 3 were also confused, but they could only follow behind the Han family young master. When they arrived at the dilapidated pier of Sunset City, the 4 of them immediately saw a small wooden boat lying there in a half-stranded state. A player was comfortably lying in the boat. As soon as he saw the 5 of them approaching, the player immediately sat up, climbed out of the boat, and walked quickly toward the Han family young master. "Hello." Without confirming his identity, he confidently greeted the Han family young master. Although they hadn't met before, he was sure that this was the person he was waiting for, because this person's appearance was too unique. The Han family young master only nodded his head. The 4 of them had already rushed up, and asked in confusion, "This is?" "I called a boat from Waterside City," the Han family young master said as he pointed. "So it's like this." The 4 of them looked at the boat. "Then how do you think Water Depth and the others got here?" the Han family young master asked in reply. "Oh. Did he help you contact them?" "No need, there's this business at the pier of Waterside City." The Han family young master had noticed this kind of player-ferry business when he was drinking at the beach bar in Waterside City, so he immediately asked for the contact information, in case he needed to call a boat. "Let's go." The Han family young master called for everyone to board the boat. "Wait." The boat owner suddenly spoke, "This boat can only carry 5 people." The 5 of them were startled, and stopped in their tracks. They sized up the size of the boat together, and felt that it was indeed true. "Oh, we'll handle this ourselves." The Han family young master smiled, "Come, take the money first." The Han family young master handed over the money bag. This person was quite surprised, because they didn't have the rule of buying a ticket to board the boat. Most players would only be willing to pay after arriving at their destination. Of course, the boat owner wouldn't refuse to pay in advance. He opened the money bag and counted it. It was the same as the agreed amount, and he nodded his head. When he raised his head, he saw that the 4 of them had already pushed the boat into the water, and had already boarded the boat. "You're not going to sit?" The boat owner was quite surprised. He didn't expect that among the 5 of them, his employer would be the one to give up on boarding the boat. "No." The Han family young master still had a gentle smile on his face, "It's you who doesn't need to sit." "What?" The boat owner opened his mouth wide. However, the Han family young master had already turned around and walked towards the boat. As he spoke, he said, "We'll leave the boat at Waterfront City's pier for you. You can take the system's ferry when you return." What a joke! The boat owner was very angry. He didn't expect that the other party would actually do such a thing. He rushed forward, wanting to pull the Han family young master back. Suddenly, a whoosh sound rang beside his ear, causing a faint pain in his ear. Looking to the side, he saw that the archer who had already boarded the boat had already nocked an arrow and aimed it at him. "You want to use this fastest method to return to Waterfront City and wait for us? Then we won't mind." The Han family young master turned his head and smiled at him. You. The boat owner wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. "We have an urgent matter to attend to." "Sorry. We'll leave the boat at Waterfront City's side." The sword demon comforted the other party. Unscathed in Battle grinned. He was the person in charge of steering the boat. The small wooden boat was also paddled. unscathed in battle, pushed with his arms, and the boat left the shore. Thanks. The people on the boat who were free waved at the boat owner. The boat owner was already petrified at the shore. Waterfront City, Jian Nanyu expected that Gu Fei and Bai Shi Jingluan would go to the warrior camp to look for him. However, after entering the city, the 7 of them weren't in a hurry to go there. Instead, they sent a message. In Waterfront City, Gu Fei had already offended some people. Coincidentally, these people were Jian Nanyu's colleagues. At this moment, Jian Nanyu kindly revealed the news to his colleagues, the warrior camp. I think that wizard is going to the warrior camp. Not only did this group of people want to kill Gu Fei to vent their anger, but they were also drooling over the equipment that Gu Fei was wearing. The person who knew Jian Nanyu also knew that Jian Nanyu didn't rob random people like them, but was hired to do so with a purpose. Therefore, he didn't suspect that Jian Nanyu had revealed the news to him. Just like that, these people were happily sold by Jian Nanyu to the #1 assassin in the parallel world. It took time to gather people. Soon, only 5 people arrived at the warrior camp. These people naturally knew that Gu Fei was very capable. They didn't have the confidence to challenge Gu Fei with just 5 people. At this moment, the 5 people saw the black-robed wizard and a Grand Master of Combat walking straight toward them on the straight road outside the warrior camp. MD. How long will it take for you guys to arrive? The 5 people were afraid of losing this rare opportunity. It was not easy to find a specific person in the parallel world. Some of them said, I'll be there soon, some said, as soon as possible. Of course, there were also those who couldn't make it. Those who had already boarded the ship to level up were too far away. They wouldn't be able to return in a short time, so they might as well give up. That wizard isn't alone. There's a Grand Master of Combat with him. The 5 people who understood the situation revealed the information to everyone. How's the Grand Master of Combat's equipment? Those who didn't make it were greedy. If they knew that the Grand Master of Combat was Bai Shi Jingluan, they would definitely have a different opinion. Therefore, Jian Nanyu was kind enough not to tell them, in case they changed their minds. I'll go scout, one of the 5 said. Most of them had seen Gu Fei before, but it was impossible for Gu Fei to recognize all of them. Therefore, this guy wasn't afraid that Gu Fei would recognize him. After saying that, he walked onto the street like an ordinary player. After a while, he brushed past Gu Fei and Bai Shi Jingluan and skillfully cast an identification spell on Bai Shi Jingluan. Failure. He didn't give up. He silently followed behind the 2 of them and appraised again. Failure again. What's going on? This person was surprised and carried out the 3rd appraisal. He was very confident in his appraisal proficiency. In the end, he still failed. He was stunned. This situation seemed like the other party's level was higher than his. He was level 40, so this Grand Master of Combat was actually level 41. Level 41 was not something to be surprised about, but the problem was that this was a Grand Master of Combat at level 41. The base of the Grand Masters of Combat was small, so naturally, there were also few masters. The new blood that joined later was still at the bottom of the line, so there were not many Grand Masters at level 41. So far, there were only 4. Therefore, the top 10 of the Grand Masters of Combat were the least valuable, and the majority of the top 10 were still level 40. He didn't expect to run into a level 41 Grand Master of Combat. He had every reason to believe that this person was 100 generations Grand Master of Combat. Setting Sun City was their neighbor, so it was much more reliable for them to visit each other than for a player from an unknown main city to suddenly appear here. This player was about to tell his brothers about this discovery when he realized that the Sorcerer and Grand Master of Combat had already turned around and were looking at him. Why are you following us? Bai Shi Jingluan asked. Ah. Are you Bai Shi Jingluan? This person's brain worked fast, and he suddenly asked directly. Yes, you know me. As expected of Bai Shi Jingluan. This person was amazed in his heart, but his face showed an excited expression. It's really you. You're my idol. He felt that this was the only way to explain why he was secretly following them. Chapter 407. There would always be various classes with different characteristics in online games. Among them, there would be a very strange phenomenon. Players of various classes would always claim that their classes had some flaws or were trash. However, this could only be claimed by players of the same class. For example, the archer class could complain about how helpless they were when they were in close combat. However, if a grandmaster of combat claimed that he could easily trample on an archer, he would definitely be strongly refuted by the archer player. At that moment, they could come up with 100 ways to destroy a mere grandmaster of combat. This kind of emotion was more like saying that one's own child would never allow others to say it. In the eyes of martial artists like Gu Fei, this phenomenon was called sectarian bias. Therefore, under this kind of background, the worship across classes was a very strange thing. 100 Lives strategist could clearly see that the kid in front of him was clearly an archer, but he was worshipping him, a grandmaster of combat. This was too surprising. Although he was surprised, 100 Lives strategist still expressed his gratitude. That guy also searched for words to continue to flatter him. At the same time, he also prepared to continue to inform his brothers that 100 Lives strategist was here. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei, who was beside him, suddenly said, "Since you worship him so much, why don't you let him give you an autograph?" Ah! The kid was startled, but he immediately nodded happily. Sure. 100 Lives strategist was not a superstar. When had he ever signed an autograph? For a moment, he scratched his ears and cheeks in embarrassment. He was very dissatisfied with Gu Fei for pushing him into such a predicament, but he had no choice but to take the pen and paper that Gu Fei handed over. He signed the 4 words, 100 Lives strategist, properly. After signing, he felt that it was not flamboyant enough. It seemed like he had to find some time to practice his autograph. Gu Fei also came over to take a look. After smiling, he handed the small notebook back to the player and said, "Look, I helped you get your idol's autograph. To express your gratitude, why don't you tell me where Ken and Yoshi is?" What? Hearing this, the player's ears were ringing as if he had been hit by a double wind. Jian Nanyu was a professional robber. There were very few people who knew about this, but the archer in front of them happened to be one of them. At the same time, he also knew that they would come to the warrior camp. This information was given to them by Jian Nanyu. At this time, when he heard Gu Fei asking about Jian Nanyu, the first thing he thought of was that their plot had been exposed. It's over. The player thought to himself. As an archer, how could he escape from these 2 people? This person thought as he changed the topic. Ha, Jian Nanyu. Hey, it's right there. The kid pointed behind the 2 of them. When Gu Fei and Bai Shijing turned around to look, he immediately turned around and ran. Escaping was the thing an archer was most confident about. This guy realized that such an old-fashioned trick had actually worked, and he really admired his own acting skills and wisdom to the point of prostrating himself in admiration. However, before he could run 2 steps, his vision suddenly darkened. A person was already standing firmly in front of him. Before he could stop, the other party had already raised his leg and kicked him. The archer took a few steps back, and his shoulder was patted. Before he could turn around, he felt the world spin around him, and he was thrown to the ground. Bai Shijing pressed him to the ground, and Gu Fei walked over and said with a smile, "Don't you want an autograph?" Then, he stuffed the notebook and pen into his pocket. In the game, other people couldn't take things out of a player's pocket, but it was allowed to throw things into it. This guy had already lost hope after being taken down by the 2 of them. He didn't say anything, but he subconsciously looked at his 4 companions at the warrior camp. In the end, this subconscious glance didn't escape Gu Fei's eyes. Following Gu Fei's gaze, he saw that there were 4 players in the warrior camp watching the scene unfold nervously. They were his accomplices. Gu Fei had already come to a conclusion. If they were just here to watch the show, their eyes would only be filled with curiosity and confusion. There wouldn't be such concern and nervousness. With this thought in mind, Gu Fei had already strode toward the warrior camp. Seeing this, the four quickly retreated into the safe zone. They had all received the message from the archer and knew that the Grand Master of Combat with Gu Fei was Bai Shijing, who was said to be able to fight 20+ people at Sunset City. Of course, they didn't dare to act recklessly. They hurriedly retreated and frantically called for their speed. Seeing that Gu Fei had left, Bai Shijing got up and followed him. The archer lay on the ground, scratching his head. He was very puzzled. He didn't say anything. For some inexplicable reason, was he already fine? Was he hallucinating? This guy pinched himself, and it hurt. After sitting up, he stared at Gu Fei and Bai Shijing in a daze as they walked toward the warrior camp one after another. Seeing that Gu Fei had seen through them, the four people at the warrior camp didn't hide anymore. After all, no one in the safe zone could do anything to them. The four of them held their weapons and quietly watched as Gu Fei slowly approached. Damn it! We're clearly in the safe zone. Why are we still inexplicably nervous? The four of them were also puzzled. You must be Jian Nanyo's friends? Gu Fei asked. Gu Fei concluded that Jian Nanyu would make arrangements here. Previously, when the archer met them head-on and sneaked behind them, he immediately concluded that the archer was Jian Nanyo's accomplice. These deductions were basically correct, but there was one thing that Gu Fei was wrong about. Jian Nanyu didn't have that many accomplices. His group of robbers was his gang of 7. Gu Fei thought that all the pirates in Linshui City were part of the same gang, but in fact, they all had their own groups. The group that came over was just one of the gangs. Jian Nanyu happened to know them and knew that they were interested in Gu Fei's equipment. That was all. Gu Fei had made the wrong move in trying to find out Jian Nanyu's whereabouts from them. Moreover, the archer from before knew Jian Nanyu, but the four people in front of him only knew that Jian Nanyu was the warrior who had just fallen out of the 5 roaches. They had no idea that Jian Nanyu was actually in the same group as them. The four people indeed did not know Jian Nanyu. Of course, they wouldn't think of hiding anything. When they heard Gu Fei's baffling question, doubt and confusion were naturally written on their faces. When Gu Fei looked at them, he felt that the four people really had nothing to do with Jian Nanyu. He was puzzled and felt that something was wrong. When he looked back, Bai Shijing was right behind him. The archer had already regained his senses and got up to run away. Why did you let him go? Gu Fei asked. Do you want to keep him on the ground? It's very ugly. Bai Shijing replied. It was easy for Gu Fei to just stand there and talk. Pressing a person to the ground without saying or doing anything was something he didn't want to do. Gu Fei was also very helpless. He turned around and said to the four people, "Tell your people to come quickly. We'll wait here." Looking at the two people who seemed to have a card up their sleeves, the four people spread the message. However, when they heard that the other party had Bai Shijing, they hesitated. Legend had it that Bai Shijing could fight more than 20 people alone. This sorcerer seemed to be able to fight many people at once. If the two of them joined hands, they didn't have enough people. Moreover, the other party actually took the initiative to challenge them. They felt that they would not only die in vain, but they would also look very stupid. Let's give up first. The leader of the gang said, I didn't expect this guy to find Bai Shijing as his bodyguard. We don't have enough people now. Let's give up first. Everyone nodded in agreement and supported the leader's decision. Therefore, the four people who had already arrived at the warrior camp suffered. Gu Fei and Bai Shijing stood outside the resurrection point like two gods. Would they not die if they went out? However, it seemed even more meaningless to stay in the safe zone. The four people thought about it and simply went offline. When Gu Fei saw that there were no newcomers, and the four people who were originally there also chose to go offline, he knew that the other party must have given up on the operation. Moreover, Jian Nanyu was not here, so he did not know how to continue. Of course, he did not know that Jian Nanyu was resurrected by the resurrection of the dead. He only thought that Jian Nanyu had died and returned to the warrior camp. I only killed him once. How much money can I get? Seeing that he could not find Jian Nanyu, Bai Shijing had no idea what to do. He could only ask about his current income and whether it was possible to quit while he was ahead. How would I know? You should discuss it with them later. Since it was directly related to Bai Shijing's salary, Gu Fei felt that it was better for Bai Shijing to negotiate with them himself. The deeper reason was that Gu Fei did not really understand the economic situation in the game. He did not know how much commission he should receive for killing a high-level NPC player. What about now? Now? Just walk around. Maybe we'll bump into each other again, Gu Fei said helplessly. On the other side, Jian Nanyu and the others deliberately slowed down their pace as they walked toward the warrior camp. When they estimated that it was about time, Jian Nanyu sent a message to his friend. How is it? Is that guy over there? He is. His friend sighed. But we didn't do anything. What's wrong? That guy actually invited Bai Shijing to be with him, said his friend. Bai Shijing? That can't be. Jian Nanyu did not expect the other party to recognize Bai Shijing. He could only pretend to be surprised. Do you guys know him? No, but one of our brothers went to ask around. It is indeed Bai Shijing, replied his friend. Did you lose any manpower? Jian Nanyu was full of anticipation for this question. Fortunately, no, replied the other party. That's good. Jian Nanyu cursed the other party's ancestors 180 times in his heart. Then what are you guys going to do next? Jian Nanyu asked tentatively. We are a little short on manpower now. Let's wait for the brothers who went to level up to come back before we make a decision, said the other party. He did not show any intention of asking Jian Nanyu for help. People of the same trade were ultimately enemies. Exchanging information hypocritically like this was already giving each other face. When it came to actual benefits, it was better to be tactful. The other party understood this principle, and so did Jian Nanyu. Hence, the conversation between the two ended there. How is it? The other 6 were waiting for the news. Damn it, they didn't do anything. These useless people are so scared when they saw Bai Shijing, cursed Jian Nanyu. Chapter 408. Gu Fei and 100-era strategist wandered around Waterside City. It was obviously impossible for them to encounter Jian Nanyu by chance. As for Jian Nanyu and the others, they didn't see any traces of Gu Fei when they arrived at the warriors' camp. Thus, they lost contact with each other. In comparison, Jian Nanyu was more anxious. His business still depended on Gu Fei. However, now that he knew that Gu Fei was coming for him, he wasn't too anxious. At the very least, Gu Fei shouldn't be in a hurry to leave Waterside City. However, he couldn't find Gu Fei for the time being, nor could he think of a good way to deal with them. It was a bit difficult. While the two of them didn't know what to do, the 5 experts of the child elite group rowed the boat to the shore. Where should we put the boat? Unscathed in battle asked. Up to you. Han family young master ignored him. In the end, Honest Sword Demon and Unscathed in battle worked together to drag the boat ashore. They placed it in the most conspicuous place and spoke to the player in charge of the nearby wine stall. They spoke very loudly, so many players in the surroundings heard them. Under such circumstances, there shouldn't be anyone who would do anything under the watchful eyes of so many people. Then, the 2 of them chased after the other 3. Han family young master and brother, you were gathering information from the players who were passing by the pier. As expected, whenever Gu Fei made a move, he would always attract attention. It was easy for them to find out what happened here not long ago. More importantly, they even managed to find out that Jian Nanyu had accepted the resurrection afterward. There really is a resurrection spell. Brother Yu was shocked. He quickly took out a small notebook and recorded the information. At the same time, he asked the source of the information about the appearance of the person who used the resurrection spell. It's a cleric. The other party only managed to say these 4 words after a long time. Brother Yu went around to ask about the attire of the cleric. He believed that with so many people present, many of them must have used identification on this priest. After a round of searching, the players who knew didn't hide anything. Brother Yu came back with his little notebook and said, the equipment is just a normal expert's equipment, but no one could identify the staff. It looks like it's a high-end equipment. Such an OP skill is probably attached to such a high-end equipment. The others nodded in agreement. At this moment, their actions attracted the attention of another group of people. A blue-clothed thief was already leading a group of people towards the 5 of them. You guys. This person walked up to the front and greeted the 5 people. The 5 of them turned to look at him. I am Painting Narrow Shadow, the leader of Waterside City's Painting Narrow Guild. The other party introduced himself. Hello. As the 5 of them greeted each other, Brother Yu filled in the information. Painting Narrow Shadow, one of the top 10 thieves on the thief leaderboard, ranked 6th. Sorry for the embarrassment. Narrow Shadow smiled. Brother Yu pointed out his ranking as soon as he came up. In his opinion, it was proof of his fame. Ranking on the leaderboard could also be considered fame and achievement. Naturally, he was happy to be mentioned. Painting Narrow Shadow immediately looked at Brother Yu in a different light. He felt that this guy was much more pleasing to the eye. Brother Yu's popularity in the gaming circle wasn't just for show. In a situation like this, he could leave a good impression the moment he appeared. How should I address you guys? Painting Narrow Shadow was done being happy and began to inquire about their origins. In the end, every time the other party said a name, he felt like he was a bit lower. After all 5 of them said their names, Painting Narrow Shadow felt like he was already a dwarf. Of the 5 people in front of him, 4 were part of the top 10, and their IDs were all famous in the gaming circle. Painting Narrow Shadow's previous pride of being one of the top 10 and ranked 6th had disappeared without a trace. Because of this, he quickly remembered why he was here. After saying, "It's an honor to meet you," twice, he quickly cut to the chase. I heard you guys seem to be asking about something. The 5 of them had been here for a long time, so they obviously couldn't hide it anymore. They could only admit it. Painting Narrow Shadow then asked, "May I know how the 5 of you are related to those 2 groups?" Han family young master answered honestly, "They're hunting them down." Oh, who are they hunting? Han family young master's answer was even bolder, both of them. After answering, Han family young master asked in return, "Are they friends of guild leader Narrow Shadow?" In reality, Han family young master knew that they weren't. He was clear about the rules of the beach tavern in Waterside City. He guessed that the other party had to take action because those 2 parties were PKNG each other here. If they were friends of those 2 parties, there was no need for them to appear here. No, they're not. They're PKNG in our tavern and broke our rules. We might have to cause trouble for them. Painting Narrow Shadow's answer was just as Han family young master had expected. I see. If you have any news about him, could you please let us know as well, guild leader Narrow Shadow? The Han family's young master smiled. Of course. How could Painting Narrow Shadow refuse the help of such an expert? He naturally agreed without hesitation. He even added the 5 of them as friends and became extremely intimate. Humph. At this moment, a cold snort entered their ears. They turned around and saw Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and his group. The cold snort came from the only girl in their group, Boundless Mang. This again. Boundless Mang said in disdain when she saw them looking over. No one had seen them before. Back in Moonlit Night City, the young master of the Han family had used this trick to swindle Boundless Mang. Although the situation now was different from the one in Painting Narrow Shadow, the essence was almost the same. They didn't expect to be seen by the person involved back then. They all felt a little awkward. Only Han family young master's expression didn't change. He only smiled. What a coincidence. This was a pun. He was referring to the coincidence of meeting Boundless Mang's group. He was also referring to the fact that Boundless Mang, the victim, had seen him with this trick. All in all, Han family young master didn't see anything to be embarrassed about. Boundless Mang curled his lips, but didn't say anything. Friends? Painting Narrow Shadow obviously didn't notice anything from such a simple conversation. We came from Cloud City together. Han family young master said. Drink as much as you want. It's all on me. Painting Narrow Shadow generously sold them a favor. In the end, everyone cheered at the same time. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and his group had quite a lot of people too. There were 40 of them. None of them quit during the journey. Now, they were all returning to their hometown together. They were the most united mercenary group. Even the 6 members of Child Elite Group couldn't compare to them. Gu Fei, the separatist, often acted on his own. So many people. Painting Narrow Shadow's mouth was bitter. He. Han family young master laughed dryly. Leader Narrow Shadow, why don't you tell us what you know about the current situation? They clearly didn't plan on staying here to drink. As they spoke, they walked towards Waterside City. What's going on? It seems like there's some trouble. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and the others began to discuss. Did Brother Zoe kill people again? Fireball's guess was very accurate. He was worthy of being the first person to know Gu Fei. They had walked around the city before coming to the beach tavern, so they didn't see the scene of Gu Fei PK. If it's Brother Zoe, of course we have to help. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka said. If it's that guy, then forget it. Fireball said. Dazzling Mang followed his gaze and knew that he was referring to Han family young master. He felt quite relieved. Why don't you like that guy? He looks like this, and he's actually a man. He's blatantly flirting with our feelings. Fireball said angrily. Good summary, Fireball. Everyone applauded, and someone even whistled. MD. Dazzling Mang cursed in his heart. He knew that this group of people were wretched, so why did they still discuss such a deep problem with them? Let's go and take a look. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka stood up. That guy said he's buying us a drink. He seems to be the owner of this stall. Someone was a bit reluctant. Take it to go. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka said. For this group of shameless and wretched people, was there anything they wouldn't do? They immediately shamelessly asked for wine to take away. The other side was suffering from the leader's words, so they had no choice but to make a big, unprofitable deal. Then, with a quick wit, they used the excuse of running out of wine to stop these guys from emptying their stall. When Narrow Shadow received this news, he almost vomited blood. Leader Narrow Shadow, what's wrong? Brother Yu, who was good at observation, noticed that Narrow Shadow's expression wasn't right. It's nothing. Narrow Shadow waved his hand. Through this incident, Narrow Shadow swore that he would never sell favors to others again. Leader Narrow Shadow, continue with your plan. Due to receiving the news of vomiting blood, Narrow Shadow's words were cut off. Continue. Narrow Shadow said. The two groups entered the city one after the other. According to the usual plan, after the sorcerer and the Grand Master of Combat killed Kenan-Yu, they would definitely head towards the warrior camp because they didn't know that Kenan-Yu could be resurrected. Everyone nodded. Kenan-Yu and the others thought of this as well, so if he wanted revenge, he would also head there. However, one of our brothers went there to ask around. There was indeed a small dispute at the warrior camp caused by the sorcerer and the Grand Master of Combat. We haven't seen any traces of Kenan-Yu and the others yet. Narrow Shadow narrated. What about the sorcerer and the Grand Master of Combat? Han family young master asked. We don't know where they went either. However, the description of their clothing has been sent to everyone in our guild. We'll report it once we find them, Narrow Shadow said. Han family young master nodded as he sent a message to Gu Fei. Change your clothes. Why? The guild is looking for you too. Keep a low profile. Gu Fei thought that the main purpose of this trip was to help 100 Generations Jingluan earn money. Although he liked it when the guild came to fight, it would be troublesome if there were new problems. Therefore, he listened to Han family young master's advice and changed into his robe. Also, Han family young master said, tell 100 Generations Jingluan that Kenan Yu isn't dead yet, so his income is still 0. Chapter 409. How is that possible? Gu Fei killed people like flies. His disappearance in the game was so obvious that only a blind person would be able to make a mistake. The priests among the 7 of them have resurrection skills. After you guys left, they resurrected Jian Nanyu. Han family young master told Gu Fei. Is that so? Gu Fei muttered. The revolution hasn't succeeded yet. Work hard. Han family young master said. This news was undoubtedly very bad. Gu Fei originally thought that he had already succeeded in assassinating Jian Nanyu. If he continued to kill him, it would just be like adding a painting to a brocade. He wouldn't think it was too much or too little. Now that he knew that his previous efforts were in vain, he immediately felt the same urgency to find Jian Nanyu as Jian Nanyu did. What's wrong? Why did you change your clothes? 100 Generations Jingluan was still puzzled by this very superficial question. Jian Nanyu didn't die. Gu Fei informed him of this grievous news. How is that possible? 100 Generations Jingluan, like everyone else, believed his own eyes. Resurrection, they have resurrection skills. He resurrected after we left. Gu Fei said. Who said that? 100 Generations Jingluan asked. Gu Fei's heart thumped when he heard this question. That's right. This was said by Han family young master. What wouldn't this guy do if he didn't pay up? He must have this kind of understanding of him. Furthermore, before Gu Fei could even think about it thoroughly, the young master of the Han family had already sent another message, we're already at Linshui City. You guys better hurry up. If we kill him ourselves, then the money won't be in your hands. Ha 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 ha. Too vile. You said you'd leave it to us. Gu Fei was furious. What's wrong? 100 Generations Jingluan was still confused. Those guys have also arrived at Linshui City. They'll also be looking for Jian Nanyu to kill. Gu Fei said. How could this be? Didn't you say you'd leave it to me? 100 Generations Jingluan was also furious. The two of them were indeed the same kind of people. They both valued honor and promises. On the other hand, the Han family young master was the opposite of this. When necessary, he would even betray himself. Then let's go look for him. 100 Reincarnations Jingluan was anxious. Wait. Gu Fei said. 100 Generations strategist looked at Gu Fei. It's not a good idea to search like this. Gu Fei pondered. The city is so big. Who knows where they went? Then what should we do? Why don't we return to the warrior camp? Gu Fei said, we'll let them kill us the first time. We'll wait for the second and third time at the warrior's camp. Isn't that good? I see. It's a pity about that first time. The Encyclopedia of Classics sighed. Everyone knew that Jian Nanyu's level was the highest and he was the strongest. Therefore, the reward should be the highest. Don't worry, it'll be over after killing a few more times. Gu Fei's demeanor of looking down on any expert would always be able to destroy the opponent's self-esteem. After the two came to a decision, they turned around and headed back to the warrior's camp. After the Han family young master and Gu Fei sent a few messages in secret, they asked Narrow Shadow about the situation. Narrow Shadow and the others were already in place. Sentries were stationed at the city gates and docks. The guild members who went to level up were also urgently being recalled. The only thing that the Han family young master felt regretful about was that the other party had placed their focus on Gu Fei and 100 Reincarnations Jingluan. According to the information they had gathered, it was indeed Gu Fei and 100 Reincarnations Jingluan who had attacked first. Green Narrow Shadow's actions were fair and just. However, the Han family young master had already reminded Gu Fei to change his clothes. According to the characteristics of the two, they definitely wouldn't notice them, so there was no need to worry about it. However, there was such a great resource in front of them to deal with Jian Nanyu. It would be a waste not to use it. Guild leader Narrow Shadow, are you familiar with Jian Nanyu's group? Han family young master started to lead the conversation. I've never met him before. I've only heard that he's a lone wolf, Narrow Shadow said. Guild leader Narrow Shadow, do you know that he's a professional robber? Han family young master asked. Is that so? I've never heard of that. Narrow Shadow remained calm when he heard the news. He was not surprised at all. It was true that the trend of robbing in the parallel world was getting more and more popular. It wasn't surprising to say that anyone was a robber. Many people even thought that robbing was a career with a good future. In this world where there were no laws, people's morals were being twisted. Those who hated robbers, apart from the kind and righteous people, were the victims who had been robbed. Even for those victims, they only hated the players who robbed them. If there was a chance to rob someone who could drop a high-quality item, they might turn from a victim to a robber without any hesitation. Seeing Narrow Shadow's reaction, Han family young master knew that he was used to robbing. This could be considered a type of attitude in the game. The more time one spent in the game, the more one would get used to this kind of thing. In the parallel world, the biggest difference was that some people would start doing this kind of thing. Talking about morality, righteousness, and justice with Narrow Shadow. This method was suitable for a shonen comic. In this world where everyone was an adult, the most effective method was to talk about benefits. As such, the Han family young master's words made Narrow Shadow feel a sweet temptation. Guild leader Narrow Shadow, are you interested in their resurrection staff? Of course. Narrow Shadow forcefully swallowed his words. Actually, as soon as he arrived at the beach and heard the news, Narrow Shadow had already started fantasizing about this magic staff. Although he wasn't a cleric, the more he wasn't a cleric, the more he liked this skill. In reality, clerics couldn't use this skill to resurrect themselves. They could only use this skill to satisfy their vanity. The ones who truly benefited were the cleric's companions. But thinking was just thinking. This thing wasn't easy to take. After all, Narrow Shadow and the others were a big guild in Waterside City. They had legitimate businesses on the beach. They didn't care about robbing people, but if they really did it, it would have a bad reputation. Very, very bad. If a little kid asked, who are the bad guys and who are the good guys, they would definitely be labeled as the bad guys. For a guild, their image was very important. No matter how much Narrow Shadow wanted this magic staff, he had to think about it carefully. He couldn't just snatch it so openly. At this time, young Master Han helped him open up a new line of thought. Why not take advantage of the fact that these fellows were also suspected of causing trouble at the wine stall and kill them all? When they dropped the equipment, no one could say anything. Narrow Shadow's eyes lit up, but then he felt that in this world full of scandals, this method could at most trick a little kid. Han family young master saw Narrow Shadow's cautiousness again. He smiled and said, Guild leader Narrow Shadow, if you think it's not suitable, why don't you let us do it for you? After all, we're going to kill these people. You just need to help us secretly and give us the support we need. Narrow Shadow's heart clenched, but Han family young master only smiled in his heart. He said he would help, but that was only on the surface. They had just met by chance, and Narrow Shadow had no reason to believe that these people would be so kind as to give such a high-quality equipment to him after they dropped it. The young master of the Han family didn't think that Narrow Shadow was that naive. The main point of his words was that they were definitely going to kill this group of people. This was actually a message to Narrow Shadow: if you want the Staff of Resurrection, you won't have a chance in the future, because Han family young master and the others would most likely get it today. If painting Narrow Shadow was more suspicious, he might even think that they were here for the staff. After all, the young master of the Han family who had been talking was coincidentally a priest. Also, with this sense of competition, Narrow Shadow would definitely think that they weren't the only ones who had seen this skill on the beach, and they weren't the only ones who were drooling over it. To prevent any accidents from happening, it was best to snatch the staff as soon as possible. If they had to worry about their face and image now, others would definitely take advantage of it. Han family young master didn't say much, but his words were very effective. Also, some of them were just Narrow Shadow's own thoughts after some guidance. If it was said that people would be suspicious of the persuasion of others, then no one would doubt their own inner thoughts. In just an instant, Narrow Shadow had already made up his mind. He laughed and said, "Brother, you're right. I really shouldn't let these people go so easily. Then, let's part ways here. I'll go back to work." Narrow Shadow said this thoughtlessly and immediately left with his companions. Han family young master smiled warmly. Everything was under control. The other 4 experts silently watched the process of Han family young master's guidance. After all, they had been in contact with Han family young master for a long time, so they could more or less understand some of his thoughts. However, there were differences among the 4. Sword Demon was the most familiar with Han family young master, so he naturally understood everything. Brother Yu was meticulous and knew the ways of the world. As for Unscathed in Battle and Yutian Shinming, they understood at the start. They knew that Han family young master wanted the people of this guild to attack Jian Nanyu. However, they couldn't understand the meaning behind the last sentence. At that moment, when they saw the other party abandon them and leave in a hurry, the 2 of them were confused. Should we help? The 2 of them really stopped thinking about helping Narrow Shadow's guild to get equipment. Naturally, a round of ridicule from the young master of the Han clan was unavoidable. The 2 of them were already used to it. Comparing these things with the young master of the Han clan was like comparing knives with Gu Fei. It was very unrealistic. No wonder this guy ran away as soon as he could. Yutian Shinming sighed after understanding the truth. Of course, Narrow Shadow would disappear quickly. The 5 people in front of him were no longer friends, but competitors. He had to find Jian Nanyu's group first. At the same time, he couldn't reveal anything about himself to these 5 people. So, even Han family young master couldn't guess what he would do. He could only design his next step. Chapter 410. What should we do next? Unscathed in Battle asked Han family young master. Warrior Camp, Han family young master said. Oh, wait for them. That's one way. Brother Yu nodded. But those guys might not be able to deal with Jian Nanyu, Sword Demon said. Sword Ghost said. After all, he had fought with 4 of Jian Nanyu's group of 7 before, so he had some understanding of their strength. We don't have confidence in them, but we should have confidence in Qianli. Han family young master said. Oh, right, right. Everyone nodded. Don't we need to send someone to the Priest Academy? Unscathed in Battle suddenly asked after walking a few steps. Han family young master immediately looked at him with disdain. Unscathed in Battle suddenly felt ashamed. He knew that Han family young master had seen through his thoughts. Unexpectedly, Han family young master sighed and said, Danqing and Narrow Shadow's focus is on priests. The Priest Academy will definitely send a lot of people there. We won't be able to snatch anything even if we stay there. Let's forget about it. Unscathed in Battle still felt ashamed. He had thought that Han family young master was so pure. He shouldn't have done that. After that, there were no more objections. The 5 of them walked towards the warrior camp. Just as they were about to arrive, Imperial Sky God Ming's sharp eyes pointed to the 2 people at the foot of the wall beside the door. Those 2 people look very familiar. The 2 people at the foot of the wall were a sorcerer and a fighter. Although the sorcerer wasn't wearing a black robe, they were old friends. They could basically recognize them from their figures. The few of them looked at each other and walked forward. Gradually, they saw that it was Gu Fei and 100 Generations Jingluan. The 2 of them also saw the 5 of them and were surprised. The Han family young master was quick-witted and instantly understood what was going on. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pointed at Gu Fei and scolded, "You bastard." Gu Fei's mind was not slow and he quickly understood. Naturally, he could only smile bitterly. After the others understood what was going on, they looked at each other. In the end, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Only the Han family young master became serious again at this moment. His face darkened as he said, "We're here to inspect the work. Is this how people we hired do things? Wow! Shameless." Brother Yu and the rest were deeply impressed. To be able to act so righteous in an instant, the Han family young master is really not an ordinary person. The encyclopedic statesman was immediately affected by the aura. He felt that his behavior was indeed inappropriate. This kind of work style of picking on the weak and fearing the strong was unacceptable. Gu Fei asked, "Where's Jian Nanyu? Where is he now?" Wow! This side was awesome too. Brother Yu and the rest were impressed again. Gu Fei directly ignored the Han family young master's righteous rebuke. He used such a direct method to change the topic. Only Gu Fei could display such a strong aura. Where was Jian Nanyu? This was a question that everyone was concerned about, but no one knew the answer to. Speaking of which, it was really sad. Both sides were anxiously looking for each other, but they couldn't find each other in such a huge main city. Who asked them to not be in love? They didn't have that kind of coincidence. Are we waiting for Jian Nanyu here? Unscathed in battle asked. Sword Demon shook his head. I don't think those guys have the ability to send Jian Nanyu here. Did you hear that? Why are you still standing here after hearing that? Go and find Jian Nanyu. Han family young master scolded Gu Fei. The Han family young master and the rest were the employers, the bosses. It was natural for them to urge their employees to do things. However, the problem was that Bai Yan Jingluan was the employee they hired. In fact, they should be yelling at Bai Yan Jingluan. However, Gu Fei was stuck in the middle. Naturally, the Han family young master vented his anger on his acquaintance. Bai Yan Jingluan was already embarrassed that he was caught waiting in the warrior camp. At this time, the Han family young master was yelling at Gu Fei. Of course, he heard it and felt even more embarrassed. He quickly set off again. However, he didn't know which way to go, so he could only choose a random street. Gu Fei sighed. Wouldn't it be better to wait here for the rabbit? 2, 3, 4 times, he could kill as many times as he wanted. But now, he could only let them take advantage of the situation. It couldn't be helped. After all, they were the employers. This was a classic case of capitalists exploiting surplus value. Helpless, Gu Fei left with Bai Yan Jingluan. After a few steps, Fireball sent a message asking, Brother Zui, what's going on? Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and the rest took almost all the alcohol in the wine stall. In the end, they weren't in a hurry to leave. Instead, they asked around the wine stall for information. This was the same as the Han family young masters group, so they immediately knew the ins and outs of the matter. Jian Nanyu. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka mumbled, this guy just dropped out of the top 5. It seems like he died in Brother Zui's hands. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement. Being dirty was being dirty, being shameless was being shameless. These guys were also veterans of the game. Their analysis wasn't much worse than Young Master's elite group's experts, especially Boundless Mang, who was an expert in PK disputes. So that guy is here to kill Jian Nanyu, Boundless Mang said. Jian Nanyu is suffering. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. Everyone in Cloud City knew that Gu Fei was the one who killed Non-Smiler. One could imagine the fate of Gu Fei's target. Do you need our help? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka said. Fireball was obviously the most familiar with Gu Fei among them. He immediately sent a message to Gu Fei, let me ask. What's up? What's up? Gu Fei replied to Fireball. Han family young master was right. Killing someone was as easy as lifting a finger for Gu Fei. It didn't matter if the opponent was a level 11 newbie who just got out of PK protection or a member of the top 5. To Gu Fei, it wasn't a problem at all. About you and Jian Nanyu. Fireball said. Oh. Gu Fei finally understood. It's nothing. I just killed him. How did you know? We're all in Linshui City. Do you need help? Fireball replied. Gu Fei was about to reply, no need, when he suddenly thought of something. He didn't need their help to kill someone, but he was looking for someone. The more people there were, the more power there was. So he quickly asked, are you all here? Yes. Brother Zui is at your disposal. Fireball replied with confidence. Good. Do you know Jian Nanyu? Gu Fei asked. Fireball asked his brothers and gave Gu Fei a clear answer, I don't know him. Let's meet up. Both sides agreed on a coordinate and met up in the city. Aeon Jingu. He knew that Gu Fei was teaming up with a Grandmaster of Combat, but he didn't expect it to be Aeon Jingu. He was surprised to see him. Hello. Aeon Jingu greeted him when he saw that he knew him. He then whispered to Gu Fei, who's this? A woman. Gu Fei's answer was very general. Brother Zui, tell me, how are you going to deal with Jian Nanyu? Sakurazuka Tsukasa's body was always straight in front of the boundless wilderness. If he covered his face, he would look very righteous. Hey! Aeon Jingu whispered to Gu Fei, so many people are helping. Will we be able to get the money? If you really want to share it with so many people, why don't you say it louder? Gu Fei replied softly. Aeon Jingu immediately shut up. What are you two mumbling about? Aeon Jingu said. The key now is to find Jian Nanyu. Even the Han family young master was helpless against Aeon Jingu's direct way of changing the topic. Aeon Jingu could only be defeated. Oh, Brother Zui still doesn't know where he is? Someone said. Of course. If Brother Zui knows, he won't be alive. Fireball smacked the idiot. I don't know yet. Gu Fei smiled. That's why I need everyone to help me look for him. You don't have to do anything. Just let me know when you find him. Brother Zui, you don't have to be so courteous with us. We'll help you take him down if you find him. There's no need for that. There's really no need for that, Gu Fei said. But the problem is that we don't know him. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka said. He's not alone. There's a total of 7 of them. Other than Jian Nanyu, there's a sorcerer, a thief, an archer, a knight, and 2 priests. Gu Fei roughly described the outfits of the group of 7. It's troublesome to find one person, but it should be easy to find a group like this, right? Everyone nodded. Thank you for your hard work. Do you have any questions? Gu Fei said. I do. A guy raised his hand. After everyone looked at him, he looked at Gu Fei expectantly. Brother Zui, are there any beauties among the 7? Oh. Everyone mumbled and looked at Gu Fei expectantly. Their expectant gazes made Gu Fei feel like he had let everyone down. Because the answer would disappoint them. No, they're all men. Oh. Unexpectedly, Everyone had a relieved expression on their faces. That's good. There won't be any obstacles when we make our move. Gu Fei wiped his sweat. Alright, alright. Everyone split up and look for him. Don't make a move after you find him. Let me know first. After Tsubasa Sakuratsuka gave the order, everyone scattered in all directions. The search for Jian Nanyu and Linshui City had begun. The rest of your mercenary group is here. Didn't you see them? Mang Mang asked Gu Fei. I saw them. Gu Fei said. Mang Mang looked around and didn't see any traces of the 5 people. He made a bold guess. Are they in the warrior camp? Smart. Gu Fei praised. I'm just familiar with my job. Mang Mang said indifferently. Gu Fei smiled. He patted the 100 Lives scripture and said. Let's go look too. Do you need my help? Mang Mang asked. No need. Gu Fei smiled. The target is Jian Nanyu alone. I have enough magic power. Mang Mang nodded. He casually picked a direction and went to look for Jian Nanyu's group of 7. At the same time, the ferry at Linshui City's level 40 training area slowly docked. A large group of players disembarked and quickly rushed into Linshui City. Chapter 411. This group of players was clearly divided into 2 groups. It did not seem like a party that was going out to level up. A regular party that went out to level up would at most have around 10 people. However, these 2 groups were more than that. It was just that one group had more people than the other. The 2 groups noticed each other, but they did not have time to think about it. Both sides had their own things to do, so they went their separate ways after entering the city. One of them was a group of robbers who had returned to deal with Gu Fei, while the other was a group of members from Green Narrow Shadows Guild. They had returned on the same ship after receiving the order to gather, and were now going to join their respective bosses. The robbers did not dare to make a move because of the presence of 100 Lives jingles. However, they had finally gathered around 70 people. 100 Lives jingles should be able to deal with 70 people by himself, right? It was the first time in the robbers' career that they had gathered 70 people to do the same thing. After investing so much manpower, the boss of the robbers swore to blow up Gu Fei and the encyclopedic classics until nothing was left. Search the city for these 2. If you find them, immediately notify everyone and surround them. The boss gave the order, and the operation began. On the other side, Green Narrow Shadows Guild was level 5. Total members, 750. It was a weekend afternoon, and it was quite a peak period. There were around 500 players online. Since Green Narrow Shadow already had the evil intention of looting the Staff of Resurrection, he might as well go all the way. He mobilized his entire guild. At this moment, there were around 400 members of Narrow Shadows Guild returning to Waterside City from all directions. If the robbers could be considered a criminal gang, then their numbers could be considered a terrorist organization. However, they were still a guild, not a professional robber group. Therefore, Green Narrow Shadow did not dare to directly say that they were going to loot people. His excuse to his subordinates was that the people who caused trouble at the wine stall were looking for people in the city. Green Narrow Shadow had to guarantee that he and his trusted subordinates would carry out the task of looting people and looting equipment. He did not expect that there would be people who dared to cause trouble at the beach tavern. Green Narrow Shadow's guild members were infuriated by Green Narrow Shadow. They began to search the city in groups of 3 to 5. Their leader is Jian Nan, and they have a lot of people. They're very strong. Don't attack recklessly when you encounter them. Inform me first, Narrow Shadow reminded the members. Everyone was self-aware. When they heard that the opponent was actually such an expert, they knew that their small group was definitely not a match for him, so they all nodded in agreement. What about painting Narrow Shadow? The main force had already gone to the cleric camp, and a few of them were left behind. They were prepared to lead the shrimp soldiers and crab generals to drown Wandering Sword's group of 7 in a sea of players. The target was a priest, so he definitely wouldn't have any PK value. Painting Narrow Shadow knew this very well, so the possibility of him dropping the Staff of Resurrection so accurately was too low. The real fight would begin in the priest's school. Narrow Shadow thought over his plan in detail and felt that he had already predicted everything, no matter how big or small. Even if those bastards wanted to snatch it from him, how could they possibly win against the sea of players in their guild? If you push me too far, I'll go all the way and kill all of you as well. Narrow Shadow thought happily. He suddenly realized that killing people was actually such an exciting thing. He was already a little addicted to it even before he killed them. He couldn't help but want to kill a few more. Jian Nan's group of 7 strolled around the city. He hadn't come up with a plan yet. The video mage and 100 Lives strategist were both unknown terrors. Jian Nan wasn't sure if the 7 of them could take them down in a head-on fight. Moreover, after taking a hug throw and a double flame flash, Jian Nan realized that 100 Lives strategist's hug throw wasn't that scary, but the video mage's double flame flash was too strong. Jian Nan asked for Flaming Cloak stats, and Flaming Cloak was ashamed. The maximum damage of his double flame flash was as disgusting as paper compared to the video mages. Everyone shuddered at the thought. This was a misconception that people who had just encountered Gu Fei would fall into. If double flame flash's damage was so high, how strong were his other spells? What they didn't know was that double flame flash was Gu Fei's strongest move. The other spells were weaker than the other. These two are really hard to deal with when they work together. It's best if we can separate them, Jian Nan said. The 7 of them thought of this as they walked, and they had already walked through 2 streets. As expected of the elites of the robbers. They often did this kind of work that others hated. The 7 of them were very careful. Painting Narrow Shadow's normal guilds weren't professional when it came to stalking people, but the 7 of them had actually noticed them. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. There's a rogue behind us. He might be following us, Blackwater said in the channel. The 7 of them stopped and looked back. They didn't even need to look. A rogue behind them immediately panicked and revealed himself. His unprofessional stalking skills left him at a loss the moment he was discovered by the target. The 7 of them looked at each other. Based on this performance, the 7 of them felt that such a character definitely wasn't a threat to them. Jian Nan wanted to ask what was going on, but as soon as he took a step, the other person immediately turned around and ran. Glue wanted to shoot, but because there were too many players on the street, it wasn't easy to shoot. He watched as the other person ran away. Who is it? The 7 of them frowned. Jian Nan, you looked at Dao Xiangmu. Everyone came to a realization. As expected of a robber, he understood things quickly from a professional point of view. It wasn't that Jian Nan didn't think that the Staff of Revival would be coveted, but he didn't think that someone would act so quickly. According to his thoughts, this news would at least spread before the robbers came. How would he know that someone was secretly fanning the flames, causing this to happen ahead of time? But that person doesn't seem like a professional. Blackwater said. Jian Nan nodded. With that level of stalking, if he was a professional, he would be worried about the future of his profession. If he wasn't a professional, it would only be more troublesome. The 7 of them quickly came to a consensus. Every profession had its own secrets. For people like Jian Nan, who were in this profession, they always kept a low profile in mind. The higher the profession, the more low profile they had to be. But for a group of amateurs to run this profession, would they understand why they had to be low profile and what it meant to be low profile? If they weren't low profile, then they would naturally be arrogant. In the game, the capital to be arrogant was usually having a lot of people. The 7 of them looked up and saw a large group of players suddenly appearing in front of them. They turned around and saw that there were more than 100 of them. Run! The 7 of them turned around and ran. Fire Beacon City. Huarini roared and unleashed his Fire Beacon City. Flames rose from the ground and blocked the entire street. When the players on the street saw a sudden fight, some ran away while others stood to the side, ready to watch the show. After using this spell, Fiery Cloak chased after the 6 of them. The people from Green Narrow Guild rushed to the front of Fire Beacon City. They didn't know what spell this was, but a thief bravely wanted to rush over. However, the moment he stepped into the fire wall, he disappeared with a "chi" sound. Everyone was shocked. They didn't think that the damage of this fire wall would be so high. Separated by the fire wall and so many players, they couldn't even see which direction the 7 of them ran to. You guys stay here and wait for the fire wall to disappear before continuing. Everyone else, follow me. The leader assigned the brawny strength-type players to stay behind while the speed-type players went around the other side. Jiannan's group of 7 was quite experienced in running away. They went through every intersection and turned around at every fork. The pursuers had been thrown off. However, no one knew if there were any more obstructions ahead. Which guild are they from? Blackwater angrily asked. Only guilds could gather more than 100 people. I think it's Green Narrow Guild. Glue saw the guild insignia that some of them were wearing on their chests. Jiannan was startled. Is the place we were drinking at today Green Narrows? Definitely. Fiery Cloak said, so it's these guys. It seems like they are using this as an excuse to kill us. What do we do now? Everyone looked at Jiannan. Normal people would think that going offline was the safest method, but from the perspective of bandits, going offline was the most dangerous. At this moment, there would definitely be people guarding the offline area. It wouldn't be hard for the 7 of them to break through this defense, but it would completely expose their whereabouts. Staying in the offline area and waiting for their targets to come back online was the most common task for Jiannan's group during their career. This was because too many people thought that going offline was absolutely safe. They didn't know that when they came back online, an even more meticulous and perfect pursuit would be waiting for them. Of course, going offline on the spot was invincible, but the system had already told them not to go offline on the spot. Going against the system was the most dangerous thing in the game, so the 7 of them didn't even think about doing this. At this moment, they had to get rid of the enemies and make them lose track of their whereabouts. Leave Waterfront City. After thinking for a bit, Jiannan finally gritted his teeth and made this decision. After the Staff of Revival was exposed, Jiannan had already put the matter of leaving Waterfront City on the agenda, but he didn't expect it to be this fast. Then the video mage, let's give up for now. Where there's life, there's hope. Jiannan said. The other 6 nodded. Let's go. The 7 of them made up their minds and continued to move forward through the streets. The streets they chose were very narrow, enough for Hu Ningyi to completely seal off Fire Beacon City. Brother Zue, Brother Zue. On the other side, Gu Fei had already received a call. Did you find anything? Gu Fei replied. That Jiannan, it seems like you aren't the only one looking for him, there are many people looking for him. How many people? I just saw over 100 people. Oh, let's not talk about that. Where is he now? I'm following him, I'll send you the coordinates. The people from Green Narrow Guild were indeed not experienced in tracking, but the brothers from Eternal Life Among Flowers were all experts in this field. Even though they weren't robbers, they often followed a girl or chased after a beauty, so they were even more skilled in this field than robbers. Therefore, it was very reasonable to say that all roads lead to Rome. Whether it was chasing after beauties or professional robbers, they could all be trained to be good at tracking. At this moment, this spy under Tsubasa Sakaratsuka was skillfully following behind the 7 of them. Butterfly Knot, will Jiannan be able to smoothly escape Waterfront City? Will teacher Gu Fei be able to successfully intercept him? Stay tuned, cough. Chapter 412. Gu Fei kept receiving the coordinates and immediately called out to 100 Lives Jingluan, quick, over here. There's news. Of course, 100 Lives Jingluan was happy. He was the one making the money. Hurry up! Gu Fei shouted as he dashed out. Unfortunately, 100 Lives Jingluan didn't add all his points into dexterity, and the shoes on his feet weren't as good as Gu Fei's. His speed was 2 levels lower than Gu Fei's. Why are you so slow? Gu Fei yelled at 100 Lives Jingluan, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Most of the companions who fought alongside him were slender-waist dancers, and the scene was always slender-waist dancers dashing out like a wisp of smoke and turning back to roar at him, "Why are you so slow?" Today, Gu Fei finally enjoyed this kind of treatment. Unfortunately, he could slow down when he was fast, but he couldn't speed up when he was slow. Although Gu Fei complained, he could only slow down and coordinate with 100 Lives Jingluan's speed. The two of them chased after the coordinates that were sent to them. The coordinates weren't only sent to Gu Fei. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and the other members of the mercenary group were constantly being broadcasted in the channel. Everyone rushed over to help Gu Fei. At this time, Linshui City was in a bit of a storm. People could be seen flashing by with weapons at any time. The curious players were all asking around what was going on. At this time, the experts of the child elite group were calmly waiting in the warrior camp. There should have been 5 people, but now, without Brother Yu, there were only 4 left. "Brother Yu, why are you taking so long?" Han family young master looked at the time and then at the few players who were hurriedly flashing by. "It seems like it's starting." "Ask Qianli how it's going," Han family young master said. The other 3 looked at him. "Why don't you ask yourself?" Although the Han family young master was indeed the guild leader and they usually acted according to the Han family young master's plans, they were all experts and had their own pride. They did not like the way the Han family young master ordered his secretary around. Han family young master could only ask himself helplessly. In the end, Gu Fei only replied with one word, "Busy." "This kid is quite efficient." "It's starting so soon." Han family's young master mumbled. "Qianli has found Azure Blade." Unscathed in battle, who was crouching at the foot of the wall, immediately stood up and raised his weapon. Being found by Gu Fei meant death. Therefore, their battle should be starting soon. How can it be so fast? The show hasn't even started yet. Han family young master seemed to have some complaints about Gu Fei finding Azure Blade so quickly. "Don't worry about it. Let's get ready." Sword Demon took out his dagger and stood outside the door in stealth. Every single person who appeared in the safe zone after a flash of white light did not escape his eyes. "I'm going too." Yutian Shinming carried his 3 bows and climbed up the building. He found a good shooting spot. "What about me?" Unscathed in battle asked Han family young master. "Same as always." "Protect me," Han family young master replied. Azure Blade's group of 7 arrived at Waterside City's 14th Street after many twists and turns. Along the way, they looked around. Whenever they saw a player running at full speed, they felt that the player might be targeting them and immediately turned around. They could have reached their destination in a straight line, but their experience allowed them to successfully evade Green Narrow Guild's pursuit. Moreover, the journey was long and unpredictable. The lurker who followed eternal life in the bushes had a hard time chasing after them. Finally, he was discovered by the other 7 players. The 7 of them pretended not to notice and stopped after turning a corner at an intersection. The poor lurker was unaware. He immediately increased his speed when he saw the other party turning around. However, when he reached the corner, Azure Blade had already swung his sword at him. Although his head did not fall off, he was already dead. The spy who sacrificed himself heroically sent out one last piece of information, one last set of coordinates. Only then did he inform everyone that he had been discovered and that he had died. "I'm sorry, brother." Gu Fei was deeply apologetic, but he did not know what to say. On the other hand, Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and the others were gloating. This was the atmosphere of the team. In daily life, this was called corporate culture. Don't worry, Brother Zui, do your best. This brat was very magnanimous in replying to Gu Fei's message. He even sent greetings to all the ancestors of his teammates. Don't worry, I'll definitely take care of him. Gu Fei felt that he could only let Azure Blade feel the value of his sacrifice by killing him. At this moment, Gu Fei and Azure Blade were not far from the coordinates of the last teleportation. They quickly rushed to the corner of the street. After seeing that the coordinates were correct, they turned to the right and immediately saw Azure Blade's group of 7 rushing out of the street. It's here. 100th Era strategist cheered as he rushed over. He clearly did not take the cruel duel seriously. He thought that it was as easy as killing an ant. He had the same thought process as Gu Fei. With his sword in hand, how could Gu Fei's speed be slow? Azure Blade's group of 7 was about to rush out of the street to welcome the dawn, but they did not expect to meet these 2 fiends. They did not dare to fight head-on, so they could only choose to retreat. Fire Beacon Wall. Huarini used the same trick and unleashed a wall of fire across the street. He was about to turn around and chase after his 6 brothers who had already run away, but the 6 of them shouted at the same time, "Fuck!" Huarini's fire beacon wall blocked their path, but Gu Fei also unleashed an electric wall at the same time. Just for the sake of Flaming Cloak, they had purposely chosen a narrow street like this. In the end, they had shot themselves in the foot. Through their careful selection, Gu Fei's wall of electricity had become a perfect barrier. Under his fame, no one dared to try Gu Fei's spell. They could only stay still and hope that Gu Fei's electric wall would disappear before Huarini's fire beacon wall. Fuck! When the 6 of them were staring at the electric wall, they suddenly heard Huarini's shout. They turned around and were stunned. The perfect barrier in their minds was nothing but trash in front of Gu Fei and the 100 Reincarnation Grandmaster. Gu Fei raised his finger and used a teleportation to flash past fire beacon wall. What was even more ridiculous was that the 100 Reincarnation Grandmaster, who was still a bit away from fire beacon wall, suddenly ran diagonally towards the wall. He then used a few steps to reach the roof. Even Feng Xing could use this technique, not to mention the 100 Reincarnation Grandmaster. He didn't even use the flying swallow slash and directly ran up. He went around the wall of fire and flew down in one breath. At this time, he used the flying swallow slash to slash down towards Jian Nanyo's head. Jian Nanyo's counterattack was not slow. He raised his shield above his head and the 100 Reincarnation Grandmaster's kick landed on the shield. If it was an ordinary player, this would be the end, but what kind of skill was the 100 Reincarnation Grandmaster? This kick landed on the shield, but the follow-up attack had already arrived. His body dropped down from the sky while his other leg kicked straight at Jian Nanyo's chest. Jiannan hastily retreated. Blackwater and the other knight turned pale with fright as they hurriedly went forward to steady him. Jian Nanyu turned around and was also scared. If he took 2 more steps back, he would have reached Gu Fei's electric wall. Would he still be alive if he touched it? On the other side, Gu Fei teleported over and conveniently lifted his leg to kick Flaming Cloak. Flaming Cloak was already lucky. Gu Fei used electric wall and teleportation, so he only had 1 dual flame flash left. He wanted to save it for Jian Nanyu, so he didn't want to use it. Otherwise, he would have used a big move and Flaming Cloak would have been destroyed by now. At this time, the 100 Reincarnation Grandmaster had just finished kicking Jian Nanyu. Gu Fei flew past him and went straight for Jian Nanyu. Jian Nanyu had just regained his footing and was still afraid of that kick, but Gu Fei had already arrived like a wolf or tiger. Jian Nanyu's body was still leaning back with Blackwater on the left and the knight on the right supporting him. In this position, if Gu Fei used the dual flame flash to slash forward, it would definitely kill 3 people. The 3 wanted to resist, but they didn't know if they could make it in time. Gu Fei also thought that he was about to succeed, but he suddenly noticed a dazzling red light flashing in front of him. Gu Fei's reflexes were too strong. He forcefully stopped his forward momentum and stomped on the ground in the opposite direction. His body quickly floated back. At the same time, another electric wall rose from the ground. Gu Fei turned around and saw Flaming Cloak, who was still on the ground, stubbornly raising his staff. At this critical moment, he saved the lives of Jian Nanyo's group of 3. Flaming Cloak was forced to do this. He could see that if he didn't do this, then Jian Nanyo's group wouldn't be able to resist. However, this obstruction also pushed the 6 of them into a desperate situation. The 6 of them were sandwiched between the Fire Beacon City and the electric wall, so their space was extremely limited. Gu Fei was a sorcerer. His area of effect spell had nowhere to dodge. However, there was no time to think about this at this point. They could only wait and see how much damage this sorcerer could inflict. Flaming Cloak's gamble really hit Gu Fei's weak spot. His area of effect spell was indeed not as powerful as the dual flame flash. Moreover, he could only use one area of effect spell at this moment. Was it a heavenly descent or a fire tree? Flaming Cloak nervously stared at Gu Fei, hoping that he could give his brothers the most important hint. But at this time, 100 Era's Jingluan was right next to him. He bent down and used a back throw to throw Huorini into his Fire Beacon Citadel while he was still in the position of being thrown. Flames soared to the sky. After being thrown, Flaming Cloak couldn't stop this enchanting flame and died in an instant. He didn't even have time to give his brothers a hint. However, with his death, this hint became unimportant. Although this throw from 100 Reincarnations Jingluan killed Flaming Cloak, it was actually a failure. At this time, if it was Slender Waist Dance or any other expert from the Child Elite group, they would definitely rush in front of Gu Fei to help him block the arrows shot by the enemy archer to interrupt Gu Fei's spell casting. This would allow Gu Fei to smoothly complete his chant and blast the 6 people in the gap. However, 100 Reincarnations Jingluan's throw not only prevented Gu Fei from casting spells, but because of Flaming Cloak's death, Fire Beacon City was immediately unharmed. How could the 6 veterans miss this opportunity? They immediately rushed out from behind the electric wall. Chapter 413. 100th Era Strategist had the ability to fight against multiple opponents at once, so he didn't need to cooperate with others. Even in team battles, most of his companions were grandmasters of combat, so he had no experience in cooperating with other classes. When the 6 of them rushed out of the fire, 100th Era Strategist didn't even know that it was caused by his Flaming Cloak. After crossing the wall of fire, Bladesman charged toward Gu Fei. His escape route was completely blocked, so what other choice did he have other than to charge forward? Azuma charged forward, while Blackwater circled around Gu Fei's flank with his dagger. Glue released arrows to disrupt Gu Fei's movements. The paladin continuously cast blessing skills on his teammates, increasing their magic defense. Inukagami and the other priest didn't care if their teammates had taken damage or not and continued to cast healing spells. The 6 of them had practiced this tactic countless times, and countless experts in the game had fallen under their siege. Even Gu Fei didn't dare to be careless. Their 3-pronged attack was almost flawless, but it was a pity that Blackwater, who was ambushing on the left, was slightly slower. What a pity! If this thief's speed was just a little bit faster, he might not have been able to escape from this situation. Gu Fei thought as he flashed to the left. At almost the same time, Bladesman stopped in his tracks and cancelled charge. He extended the shield in his left hand and smashed it toward Gu Fei's face. At the same time, he slashed with the sword in his right hand, and Blackwater arrived on the left. He couldn't use backstab, so he could only use a normal attack. It was still a pincer attack. But to Gu Fei, it wasn't difficult to resolve. His opponent's attack was higher, so he just had to lower his body and use dual flame flash. As Gu Fei was calculating, he suddenly heard 100th Era Strategist shout, "An arrow is coming." When Gu Fei heard this, he was immediately startled. He quickly turned his body to the side and heard a "shio" sound. An arrow flew under Jian Nan's shield and barely grazed the corner of Gu Fei's clothes. So sneaky. Gu Fei broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't expect that the loophole in the previous three-way pincer attack was actually rehearsed into a trap by these guys. After he stepped into this position, Jiannan immediately followed up and hit his face with his shield. This was actually to block Gu Fei's sight. Blackwater and Jiannan were not the main killers of this attack. The real killer move came from Glue. These two guys in close combat just came up to divert attention and cover. If not for the reminder from the people beside him, Gu Fei's arrow would have definitely hit its target. But at this time, although he barely dodged it, he also revealed a big flaw. This turn of his body just happened to fall into the arms of the Blackwater attack, and he was fiercely stabbed by the Blackwater. Fortunately, it was only a normal attack, so it was not a big deal. When Gu Fei saw Jiannan raising his shield to block his face, he knew that it was not wise to continue entangling like this. He quickly retreated a few steps. His field of vision was wide open, and Gu Fei saw that Bai Yan Jingluan had already rushed to Glue to solve this threat. But Bai Yan Jingluan was very tactically cooperative. The knight desperately tried to stop him. Although he was thrown out by Bai Yan Jingluan after a few punches and kicks, at least he had the intention. If it weren't for the two abnormal kung fu combinations, Jian Nan Yu and the others would not have lost at all. After Bai Yan Jingluan threw away the knight, he went to deal with Glue. Of course, Glue was not stupid enough to fight with Bai Yan Jingluan. He still had an advantage over Bai Yan Jingluan in terms of running away, so he immediately turned around and ran away. It was also at this time that Gu Fei's electric wall disappeared, and Glue had the space to sprint. But his brother was still fighting, so he obviously could not run away. But he thought that if he could lure Bai Yan Jingluan away, the remaining people on his side could besiege Gu Fei. It might be a good opportunity, so he turned around and shot arrows to provoke Bai Yan Jingluan while running. Unfortunately, Aeon Jingluan was determined. He only wanted to kill Jian Nanyu and make money, so he didn't care about the Glue at all. More importantly, the Glue's attack was not a threat to him, so he just twisted his body and dodged it. On the other hand, Gu Fei was not at a disadvantage at all, but he only had enough magic power for one double flame flash, so he did not want to waste the good opportunity that he was looking for. Bai Yan Jingluan turned around to help, and Inakamu and the other priest tried their best to stop him, but they were easily knocked down by Bai Yan Jingluan with one punch and one kick. That priest was so persistent. Even when he was on the ground, he still refused to give up. He nimbly extended his arms to grab Bai Yan Jingluan's calf, and shouted at Glue, "Shoot!" This method was considered one of the more controversial PK methods in the game: get close to the opponent and restrict their movements while enduring the damage. This method was disdained by most experts, but Jian Nan Yu and the other 6 obviously did not have such principles. As long as it was beneficial to the outcome, they would choose all the feasible methods. Bai Yan Jingluan was also careless. He did not expect his opponent to be so weak that he even had to hug someone's thigh. Glue had already shot 2 arrows when he heard the notification. His sniping skill was temporarily on cooldown, so he used 2 consecutive arrows. The priest was also unforgiving. He had been hugging one of Bai Yan Jingluan's legs earlier, but now he seized the opportunity to hug both of Bai Yan Jingluan's legs. Bai Yan Jingluan did not have the time to struggle, and Glue's 2 consecutive arrows had already arrived. He suddenly stretched out his hands, one in front of the other, and put his palms together, catching both arrows at the same time. Twin dragons playing with pearls. Beautiful. Gu Fei applauded for him. Twin dragons playing with beads was not a move to catch hidden weapons. Bai Yan Jingluan made a slight change and used it here, but Gu Fei still easily saw through it. His shout made Jian Nan Yu and the others feel a chill in their hearts, especially the one who hugged Glue's thigh. He thought that he had fought for time at all costs, but seeing that Glue still had the leisure to observe the situation, he knew that the cooperation between Jian Nan Yu and Blackwater was no threat to the mage at all. It was meaningless for him to hug Glue's thigh. Seeing the situation, Jian Nan Yu knew that he was doomed. He could not even run, because apart from Blackwater and Glue, the other 4 had no speed at all. But it was also meaningless to sacrifice 2 more people. Jian Nanyu winked at Blackwater, signaling him to leave first. Blackwater understood Jian Nanyu's intention. Without any hesitation, he immediately turned around and left. At the same time, he waved at Glue, who wanted to shoot another arrow at Bai Yan Jingluan. Glue gritted his teeth. After releasing the arrow casually, he also turned around and ran out. The 2 of them turned into the preserved revolutionary tinder one after the other. Jian Nanyu was worried that Gu Fei would obstruct Blackwater, so he was ready to intercept him. Little did he know that Gu Fei did not care about Blackwater leaving at all. Jian Nanyu had long felt that the 2 of them were only targeting him, but he did not know that they were targeting him so clearly. It seemed that as long as he was killed, they were not going to make things difficult for the others. Jian Nanyu looked back and saw that Bai Yan Jingluan had broken free from the one who was hugging Glue's thigh. At this time, he completely ignored the other 3 people and rushed toward him. He immediately winked at the other 3 people, signaling them to leave first. Jian Nanyu decided to hold on a little longer to increase his brother's chances of survival. Unfortunately, this hope was like a bubble. Who could block a blow from Gu Fei and Bai Yan Jingluan when they joined forces? Jian Nanyu was blocked by the sword and the shield in front, but Bai Yan Jingluan had already approached him and grabbed him. With a wave of his hand, he threw him out. Jian Nanyu was depressed. So what if I die? Why did I die in the same way twice? Just as Gu Fei was about to follow up with a dual flame flash, he suddenly heard the sound of wind whistling past his ears. He didn't have time to take a look, so he hurriedly retreated. 100-Era's strategist also turned around to dodge. When he looked sideways, a group of players appeared at the intersection of the street. They pointed at Gu Fei and shouted, "He's here." At the same time, the archers' tracking arrows rained down. The sky was filled with fire wheels, and the fire trees on the ground were so hot that they were bubbling. While Gu Fei swung his sword to block the arrows, he ran to dodge the magic that was about to appear. Bai Yan Jingluan did the same, but he was more elegant than Gu Fei. He jumped on the wall beside him and flew up to the roof with another swallow slash. Jian Nanyu also put the shield on his head to dodge, but he was cursing in his heart, "These guys are really ruthless." He recognized these people. He had hoped to increase Gu Fei's PK value in the warrior camp, but these guys were not rash. They did not act rashly after recognizing the powerful combination of Gu Fei and Bai Yan Jingluan. Instead, they officially attacked after they gathered their people. Finally, they found Gu Fei at this critical moment. Their appearance could be considered to have saved Jian Nanyu's life, but he did not feel the slightest bit grateful. These guys threw AoE spells at this area without any scruples, completely ignoring Jian Nanyu's existence. If they all exploded, not only would Gu Fei be finished, but Jian Nanyu would also be finished. The knight and the 2 priests were about to leave, but this sudden change caused them to stop in their tracks. They hurriedly came to Jian Nanyu's aid. The knight's holy heal and the priest's recovery all landed on Jian Nanyu's body without any hesitation. Jian Nanyu's movements were slow, but with the support of his companions, he stepped out of the sea of fire with the shield on his head. Before he could catch his breath, the flames beside him arrived again. How could Gu Fei be willing to let him go so easily? Just like him, he flashed in this direction. At this moment, he leaped and had already flashed valiantly with double flame flash. Jian Nanyu subconsciously swung his shield to block. If it were any other time, Gu Fei would have a follow-up move. He would use the shield to cut Jian Nanyu's body before activating the spell. However, he did not have the time to do so at this moment. The enemies at the end of the street continued to attack as they approached. All of them were aimed at Gu Fei. Gu Fei wasn't willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of Wandering Swordsman. Thus, when his sword slashed at Wandering Swordsman's shield, he shouted, "Dodge," and activated the spell. Seeing Jian Nanyu step out of the sea of fire, Gu Fei also hoped that Jian Nanyu would not be able to withstand his attack. However, his wish did not come true. Jian Nanyu's three brothers were not fake. They used recovery spells to keep Jian Nanyu in high spirits. At this moment, he blocked Gu Fei's attack with his shield and continued to move forward. Gu Fei, on the other hand, was entangled by another wave of arrows and spells. 100 eras. Gu Fei shouted. At this moment, he really did not have the time to deal with Jian Nanyu. He could only do it himself. However, 100 eras statecraft was obviously not able to deal with such a big scene. At this moment, he was standing on the roof safe and sound. However, he did not know whether he should deal with the group of people first or continue to chase after Jian Nanyu. When he heard Gu Fei calling him, he quickly replied loudly, "What?" Chapter 4:14. What, was just a subconscious response. When Gu Fei called him, he naturally looked in Gu Fei's direction. Then, what he saw was Gu Fei, who was flustered by the multiple attacks. Of course, Gu Fei would be flustered. If he could still remain calm in such a situation, he would have the time to deal with Jian Nanyu. At the same time, 100 Lives Grandmaster saw the fleeing Jian Nanyu and immediately came to his senses. He stepped on the roof and chased after Jian Nanyu. 100 Lives Grandmaster's agility did not go to waste. He ran much faster than Jian Nanyu and the others. It did not take him long to catch up. He took a big stride and flew down from the roof like a rock. However, when Jian Nanyu saw 100 Lives Grandmaster chasing after him, he already had a plan in mind. When the figure above his head swayed and 100 Lives Grandmaster was about to land, Jian Nanyu took a step forward and extended his arms to perform the ultimate move of the warrior, Whirlwind Slash. Even Gu Fei had suffered a great loss from this move, especially after he became a two-handed berserker. The Whirlwind Slash performed with both hands was equivalent to changing directions and doubling the speed of the rotation. Even Gu Fei did not dare to say that he was 100% sure that he could take it on. At that moment, 100 Lives Grandmaster was in midair. The Grandmaster of Combat did not have a weapon and could not use the techniques that Gu Fei often used. When Gu Fei turned around and saw the situation, he felt that 100 Lives Grandmaster was in trouble. Then, 100 Lives Grandmaster rubbed his palms together and formed a palm with one hand to slap the sharp wind created by the Whirlwind Slash. Was he trying to catch Jian Nanyu's spinning sword? Gu Fei knew that the Grandmaster of Combat's weapon was a glove. It did not seem to be a problem for him to directly clash with the opponent's sword. However, the problem was that there was an absolute difference in strength between the two. Even if he caught the sword in the Whirlwind Slash, 100 Lives Grandmaster of Combat's strength would not be able to interrupt the warrior's Whirlwind Slash. Would it not be even more embarrassing if he was thrown into the air by the Whirlwind Slash? While Gu Fei was thinking about this, the two sides had already collided. The moment the palm of the 100 Generation Statecraft came into contact with Jian Nan's Whirlwind Slash, a water droplet the size of a wash basin suddenly spat out from his palm. The water droplet immediately shattered into a cloud of mist when the blade of the sword came into contact with it. At the same time, the 100 Generation Statecraft was also bounced up in the air, drawing a perfect arc as he flew over the roof and landed on the street next door. Jian Nan was only stunned for a moment. This was not a good time to think. He immediately dispelled his skill and ran away with the other three brothers. He looked back at Gu Fei and saw that he was too busy with the robbers to care about him. Jian Nan finally heaved a sigh of relief. At that moment, Jian Nanyu was sure that the 100 Reincarnation Classics had used a skill. He had never seen this skill before, but he could make a rough guess. This should be the first skill that a Grandmaster of Combat would have after advancing to Chi Master at level 40, Chi Wave Shield. There were very few Grandmasters of Combat, and there were even fewer high-level ones. Among the high-level ones, there were even fewer who could advance to Chi Master. This was because the other path of advancement, the Striker, was a continuation of the previous Grandmaster of Combat's development of combo attacks. It was mainly based on high-speed, close-range attacks. It was obviously cooler, so it was more favored. The path of Chi Master was currently only seen in some official information. Jian Nan had never come into contact with it in the game. He did not expect the leader of the Grand Masters of Combat, 100 Lives Classic, to advance to Chi Master. Looking at it this way, 3 of the original 5 roaches had taken the non-mainstream path. Although the officials claimed that each class had its own characteristics and was absolutely balanced, balance did not change the player's preferences. For example, the archer who had advanced to sharpshooter, the thief who had advanced to assassin, the warrior who had advanced to violent warrior, and even the striker who had advanced to grandmaster of combat. These paths of advancement were obviously more aggressive. Most players liked these classes, so the overall proportion of people who had advanced to this path was higher. However, among the original 5 roaches, Slender Waist Dancer had advanced to Godly Thief, Deep Waters had advanced to Lurker, and now 100 Lives Classic had advanced to Chi Master. At this moment, Jian Nan could not help but think of Gu Fei. Although he was not one of the 5 roaches, he was obviously stronger than the 5 roaches. He was also a lightning mage, which was relatively rare among mages. MD. A bunch of non-mainstream. Jian Nan cursed bitterly as he ran. At this moment, he was finally free. He immediately messaged Flaming Coat, who had died earlier, and Blackwater and Glue, who had escaped earlier. Although he was embarrassed by the 2 of them, it was still a good thing that he had only sacrificed 1 person in the end. Flaming Coat, how are you doing? Jian Nan asked Flaming Coat. Although the battle was complicated, it had only lasted for 2 to 3 minutes. At this moment, Flaming Coat had just revived in the Mage Academy. He glanced at the situation and replied, I'm at the Mage Academy. There are indeed people here, but not many. I walked out of the revival point, and no one noticed me. Then you should go alone. We'll meet at XXX outside the city. Jian Nan replied to Flaming Coat and turned his gaze to his 5 companions. Let's split up too. Split up. Dao Xiangmu was shocked. He was only a cleric. How could he protect himself if he went alone? Jian Nan nodded. Fuck, I should have thought of this earlier. If we move together, we'll attract too much attention. That's why we're so easily noticed. If we go alone, we'll be less of a target, and it'll be easier for us to escape. The 5 of them were enlightened. Actually, it was impossible for the enemy to recognize each and every one of them. It was just too eye-catching if they gathered together. Let's split up and find a way. We'll meet at XXX outside the city, Jian Nan said. The 5 of them nodded. You too, be careful. Jian Nan gave his last warning to Dao Xiangmu and the other cleric. Clearly, with their identities and abilities, they needed to bear a greater risk. Splitting up would be the most stressful for them. However, the 2 of them did not have any objections. Jian Nanyo's group of 7 was also very loyal to each other. However, they never thought that there was a need to live and die together. The greatest benefit or the smallest loss was what they valued. You be careful too. The 2 clerics gave Jian Nan the same warning. The risk Jian Nan had to bear was actually not lower than the 2 of them. He was facing the 2 strongest people they had ever seen in the game. After saying goodbye to each other, they each found their own way and set off. At this moment, on Linshui City's 14th Street, Gu Fei's battle had yet to end. Jian Nan's group successfully escaped. The 100 Lives strategist was thrown to another street. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Gu Fei didn't have much magic power left. He was facing a large number of enemies by himself. Arrows chased after him, and spells were everywhere in the sky and on the ground. If it wasn't for the limited attack range of a sorcerer, the other party would have burned the entire street. Although it wasn't to such an extent, Gu Fei's escape route was blocked by the other party. The other party was very experienced. They threw spells at the spot behind Gu Fei. If Gu Fei wanted to dodge and retreat at the same time, he could only step into the bombardment area of the other party's spells. In order to dodge the other party's spells, Gu Fei could only take the initiative to close the distance between him and the other party. However, he also knew that he still had space to dodge. When the distance was close enough, the other party's spells would line up in a row, and he would no longer have any space to hide. Unless the other party's spell control was as haggard as the reborn amethyst. This was obviously unrealistic. The other party was a robber, and they were extremely fierce. He couldn't retreat, and there was nowhere to hide. Taking the initiative to attack was the only way out. Gu Fei also saved himself the trouble of thinking. He suddenly quickened his pace and brandished the Night Streamer sword, charging towards the other party's formation. The other party was extremely surprised. They didn't expect their opponent to have such an imposing aura even when he was alone. Moreover, he was a sorcerer, and he was still so brave as to charge towards them. "Sorcerers, get ready," the leader shouted. He had been waiting for this opportunity to take down Gu Fei in one fell swoop. The sorcerers raised their staffs high, some pointing to the sky, some pointing to the ground. However, Gu Fei acted as if he had heard an order. He raised the sword in his hand, and the arrows fell to the ground one after another. "Look at the distance." "Fire," the leader gave the order, and all the spells were chanted and fired. At the same time, Gu Fei also summoned a spell, lightning. It was the last spell he could use. There was an explosion of thunder in the sky, and the lightning spell was the first to be summoned. A blue light flashed, and a sorcerer in the opposite formation raised his staff high. It looked like he was summoning lightning himself. The sorcerer was dumbstruck by the lightning, but he didn't die. Gu Fei was also very surprised, but then he remembered that he was wearing the flaming robe, and not the dark robe. At this time, the other sorcerers had already successfully released their spells. The streets and the sky were filled with fire, and only the place that the kid pointed at had a blue sky. And Gu Fei appeared under this blue sky. Although he still had the 1,000 layers flames of the cinder tree under his feet, ordinary sorcerers didn't have the attack power to instantly kill Gu Fei, and even if they did, they might not be able to instantly kill him. Gu Fei had the Wind Chaser's protection hanging around his neck. Just this equipment alone made his HP twice that of an ordinary sorcerer. Gu Fei, who usually didn't care about how much HP he had, couldn't help but feel that this equipment gave him a sense of security. At this time, Gu Fei was already close to the enemy. The enemy's front row was full of archers, and when they saw the enemy approaching, they immediately dodged to the side. Gu Fei swung his sword left and right. Sometimes there was fire, sometimes there was lightning, and sometimes there was only sword light. He didn't aim to kill anyone, but his current goal was to escape. Behind the archers were the sorcerers. Gu Fei relied on his strength to be more awesome than ordinary sorcerers, and when he got close, he used the stained 18 falls technique. 2 sorcerers had already been thrown to the ground by him, and the other sorcerers also dodged chaotically to the side. Like the archers, sorcerers were especially flustered when they were closed in. Behind them were the warriors and thieves, who hadn't had the chance to attack yet. Close combat was their main battlefield. Gu Fei also knew that the difficult breakout had only just begun. A thief came at him head-on, and Gu Fei stabbed out with his sword. There was no suspense in being hit, but the problem was that the damage wasn't enough to make the opponent feel any pressure. Looking at the heavily armored warriors behind him, Gu Fei felt that it would be quite difficult to break through this barrier in this narrow street. As a result, he didn't try to force his way through, and retreated a few steps back to the group of sorcerers and archers. It was better to bully these guys first, and then act according to the situation. Gu Fei thought. Chapter 4:15. The robbers were very depressed. They didn't expect the situation to turn out this way. Those who hadn't fought with Gu Fei face to face wouldn't understand how terrifying his skills were. Most people thought that he was a mage who could instantly kill a lot of people. Judging him like that was too insulting to Gu Fei. For example, a sorcerer without mana was able to cause chaos in a group of people. This was something that had never happened before. Gu Fei shuttled through the group of mages and archers and bullied them. He kept a distance of half a meter from them from time to time. This tactic was a bit despicable. Some of the enemy archers had already run away, but when they turned back to shoot, Gu Fei would dodge and the arrow would hit his own people. Gu Fei used homing arrow. This skill had a long cooldown and could only be used after a long time. At first, Gu Fei was more ruthless. He even killed a mage with continuous attacks, but he soon found that these mages were actually very good human shields. Normal mages didn't have high agility, so Gu Fei could easily wander around them. So although the warriors and thieves squeezed over, they couldn't find a good opportunity to attack. A thief wanted to get behind Gu Fei. There was always a mage behind Gu Fei. A warrior wanted to use charge or whirlwind. Someone used it, but the result was the same as an archer's arrow. Gu Fei dodged and his own people were sent flying. Spread out, mages, spread out. The enemy leader roared in exasperation. But in this narrow street with walls on both sides, where could they spread out to? Gu Fei had long since seen this point and took advantage of the terrain to the extreme. But even so, under the cover of the warriors and thieves, the mages gradually moved to the back. These melee classes had been playing hide and seek with Gu Fei for a long time and had long been suppressed. Now that they could finally fight, they roared and rushed towards Gu Fei. But at this time, Gu Fei turned around and ran. There were archers in front, but when they saw Gu Fei running towards them, they were all at a loss and didn't dare to shoot. Why? Because Gu Fei was not an ordinary person, they had already discovered that he could almost dodge the arrows they released. Previously, it was fine if the arrows missed, but now, behind Gu Fei were their own brothers. When Gu Fei dodged, all the arrows hit their own people. At the end of the day, the robbers did not have enough manpower. There were only a dozen or so archers and mages. If there were dozens of them, Gu Fei would have been burned to ashes by the mages or shot into a hornet's nest by the archers. Stop them, stop them. The gang leader roared angrily when he saw how useless his archers were. When the archer saw that his boss had spoken, he thought that even if he shot his own people, his boss would take responsibility, so he immediately shot boldly. As a result, Gu Fei either dodged or pushed them away. In any case, not a single one of them hit him. The bandits chasing behind him kept yelling and cursing. Stop arguing. The gang leader realized that he seemed to have made a small mistake in his command, and he was very unhappy. Hold on to that guy. The boss felt that telling the archers to stop them was simply nonsense, so he simply said it more clearly. The street was only so wide. If the archers lined up in a row, it would not be a problem for them to hold on to Gu Fei. As soon as the shout came out, Gu Fei's heart also tightened. He hurriedly adjusted his footsteps and leaned against the wall. The other side did not understand Gu Fei's intentions, but when Gu Fei ran close to the wall, some of the archers who were diagonally facing him boldly released their arrows. There was a wall behind them, so they were not afraid of accidental injuries. However, just as Gu Fei was about to come into contact with the archers, the two coming at him had already stretched out their arms, and Gu Fei suddenly stepped on the wall on one side. Gu Fei's strength level wasn't high enough to support him to the roof, but it was enough to support him to jump a little higher than where he stood. Then, with one hand on the wall and the other on the archer's shoulder, Gu Fei leaped over the wall. The archers screamed and turned around, but Gu Fei had already landed on the ground and ran another 3 meters away. Now that there was no one on their side in front, the archers hurriedly began to draw their bows and shoot without restraint. The boss was so angry that he desperately summoned the mage. But did Gu Fei's previous preparations all go to waste? At this time, the mage had already switched to the back of the line, and suddenly had to switch to the front. After a moment of chaos, Gu Fei had already run a distance away, and the mage could no longer use spells to perfectly pave the way for Gu Fei to sprint forward. Chase, chase for me! The boss roared and roared. In fact, Gu Fei's escape was not at all carefree. He knew that he would definitely die in a long battle, so he immediately ran away after disrupting the other side's formation. At this time, he was already fighting with his life on the line. Dodging with his back to the arrows, he was a little careless, and an arrow had already pierced his shoulder. The archers behind him were still shooting as they chased after him, and Gu Fei did not know if he would be exhausted to death by them at this rate. However, there was already a turn in the street ahead, and as long as he could reach that place, his chances of survival would greatly increase. But at this moment, Gu Fei seemed to see a head poking out from that turn in the street, and then quickly shrinking back. Could it be an ambush? Gu Fei's heart tightened, and he did not dare to get too close to that side. After a few sprints from the middle of the street, he finally reached that turn. Gu Fei turned his head to look, wanting to see what the ambush was before deciding what it was. As a result, when he glanced over, he saw a group of extremely wretched fellows crouching at the foot of the wall, each of them looking like a thief. The moment Gu Fei rushed past, he saw all of their heads turning in his direction with a swoosh, and then their faces were filled with surprise. "Brother Zui, come here quickly!" one of them shouted. Gu Fei had long since relaxed, and he recognized these fellows as the eternal life among flowers. He quickly rushed into the street, and Tsubasa Sakaratsuka was already waving his hand. "Brothers, it's our turn to fight." Then, he saw the fellows under the wall lazily stand up, and while laughing, they pulled their bows and jumped out of the street together. "Shoot!" Tsubasa Sakaratsuka shouted. "Shoot!" Everyone shouted after him, and some of them even whistled in a perverted manner. Gu Fei felt a little embarrassed to be among them, and then he looked at the vast expanse of grass next to him, and saw that the girl was calm and at ease. Habit becomes second nature. This saying was true. Gu Fei thought. The archers of the robbers charged fiercely at the front, and their bows were raised to shoulder level. From the looks of it, they had thought of themselves as a special police force that was going to capture a fugitive. Unexpectedly, at the corner of the street, Gu Fei jumped in alone, and then dozens of people jumped out. "Ambush!" The archers shouted, and the enemy was already raining arrows. Eternal life in the flowery thicket was made up of archers. Fireball squeezed into the middle and wanted to throw a spell, but this group of unorganized and undisciplined guys bumped into him, and he couldn't even complete a successful cast. Although it was chaotic, in this kind of street battle, the simultaneous shooting of nearly 40 archers was too powerful. The archers at the front of the enemy were instantly wiped out, not a single one was spared. Right behind the archers were the bandits. There was nowhere to hide in the street, and a volley of arrows led to the same result. The third group were the mages who had previously thrown spells at Gu Fei. They had low health and weak defense, and were wiped out after a volley of arrows. After 3 waves of attacks, the 3 main classes of the robbers were clearly eliminated, and the next to be challenged were the warriors. Tank, tank! The boss only reacted after 3 waves of his men were wiped out. The tank warriors rushed out with shields and blocked the archers' attacks. Retreat, retreat! It would be stupid to charge forward at this time. Forward, forward! Tsubasa Sakaratsuka commanded everyone to move forward. It was now the archers' turn to show off their strength. They all pretended to be cool and raised their bows as if they were Agent 007. "It's my turn now." Fireball stomped his feet in the crowd. The opponents were all warriors with high defense, so it was time for him to show off as a mage. "Go away." Fireball was pushed out of the crowd by the archers. Fireball was furious. He turned his head and saw Gu Fei standing beside him. He held an apple in his left hand, and took out a mage robe from his pocket with his right hand. He handed it to Fireball along with the Night Stream sword. "Here, I'll let you show off." Fireball accepted it blankly. After seeing the attributes of the two items, his breathing quickened. He quickly took off his robe and put on the Night Spirit robe. He threw his staff to the side and pointed the Night Stream sword at the enemy formation. Fire will from the heavens, descend. Fireball chanted loudly. Flames flashed in the sky, and he pounced on the ground. The street instantly became quiet, and a large blank space was dug out from the enemy's formation. As a normal mage, Fireball mainly added points to intelligence. He usually used AoE spells when leveling up, so his proficiency level was higher than Gu Fei's. At this moment, he was wearing the Night Spirit robe and wielding the Night Streamer sword. The spells he chanted were much stronger than Gu Fei's. Gu Fei's AoE spells could only insta-kill professions with low HP, but with Fireball's two pieces of equipment, even warriors would be turned into ashes under his hands. Of course, it wasn't absolute. There were still a small number of them standing. But the key was that Fireball quickly added 1,000 layers flames, so the world became so quiet. Sure enough, he killed a mage in seconds. The survivors among the robbers stuttered. Their boss had also been killed by those two spells. The archers of eternal life in the flower bush were also shocked by the fierce clearing. The toughest warrior was actually so weak. Everyone subconsciously thought about what would happen if such a spell was thrown on their head, and suddenly felt their hearts beat faster. Everyone forgot to continue shooting arrows and slowly turned their heads back. Behind them, the mage in black lowered his head and held a long sword in his hand, making a very reserved pose. After feeling the atmosphere for a moment, the mage slowly raised his head and smiled contemptuously. Not bad. There was a dead silence. But it was quickly interrupted by a crisp crack. Gu Fei bit an apple and said to Fireball, "That's enough. Give me back my equipment." Fuck. Only then did everyone realize what was going on. They surrounded the Fireball and violently hammered it. Butterfly Knot, don't worry if Fireball won't return the equipment to Gu Fei. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.